Thank you. I'd like to call this BESE Retreat to order. Roll call, please.
Dr. Bogey, not in attendance. Mr. Castillo.
Here.
Dr. Davis. Here. Ms. Ellis. Here. Mr. Garvey.
Here.
Ms. Holloway.
Here.
Mr. Morris.
Here.
Ms. Orange Jones, not in attendance. Mr. Rock. Ms. Bochet.
Here.
Dr. Peters.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We're so happy to have all of you here today. And we know how cold it is outside, so we're going to do our best with the weather coming in to have a very productive retreat, but also to make certain that we get you back to the road home safely. In regards to introductions, housekeeping, please note BESE staff has changed their
We have drinks here, and we'll have lunch in the ballroom, but that will be around 11, be delivered around 11:15. So we have an extra overflow room over here. If you would like to sit down, do your like we normally do.
Good, thank you. Also, you have a speaker in front of you. Shannon, you're the one. You want to give them instructions about the speaker?
Yes, and the mic's in front of you. You have to push, make sure the green mic's on so that we can hear you.
All right, so just notice, just press the button. Thank you. Introduction, and he's like part of us now. We're almost wanting to put him at the table with us. Senator Ray, I'm sorry, State Rep, Ray Garofalo. There you are, I'm sorry. Thank you for being here. It's such a pleasure. We have a new member today, and Ms. Sue Weaver is replacing Mr. Tony Davis, and we're happy to have you. The governor has appointed her in this position until someone is newly elected for Tony Davis' seat. Sue, would you like to give us an introduction?
Sure. Can you hear me now? Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I was very honored that the governor asked me to do this job, and he said that it was important to have a person in this spot for the, I guess, 2 or 3 months that it will be before someone is elected, and that won't be. I'm not running. I think there's six candidates running for the position. But I am I'm from Nashville. I've been was a dean at Northwestern for 17 years, was dean of education and also led general studies. I've been a school board member in East Baton Rouge Parish many years ago, before some of you were born probably. And I've been an English teacher mainly most of my life. So that's the story about Sue. Thanks.
Well, welcome. Thank you. On another note, if you notice in front of you, you have a quote by Socrates. I thought this was so appropriate. And the secret of change is to focus all of your energy, not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And I just thought this was so appropriate for us as a board, and knowing your importance, your engagement, your collaboration, and communication that you want out there for our students, that we're going to move forward building on the new. And you're going to hear a lot from Superintendent Bromley today, also with our legislative process, and how are we going to collaborate the new and be behind what we feel is important for student achievement. So, in saying that, I also have placed a picture. It's a print, and this print, you'll find it quite interesting, is from someone you were able to meet at our last BESE retreat when we had our swearing in. This is from Chief Justice John Wiener. I don't know if you know, but he's an artist. And so this is late in getting to you, but I was able to get those a week ago from him for you. And so please enjoy your print from him. And he doesn't disclose this much, but we know that anytime we have a raffle or some donation going on, he donates a print. But he wants you to, actually, I wanted you to have this because it's so special. So please enjoy the print, and hopefully you can display it in your office.
Also, you have a little extra mask gift receipt. This is for you personally. Doesn't, it's just a little fun thing that I thought, since we didn't have our partitions, if you wanted some extra protection, you can see someone's face. Guidance says you're supposed to wear the mask with it, but, you know, it's fun thing to have.
All right, we're moving on. Any other questions or introductions or anything you'd like to say before we move forward? Thank you. If you notice the agenda, we have 3 items here: consideration of a discussion regarding BESE member communication and collaboration and so forth. So the first, I'd like a motion in regards to, Shane, do you want to take the first?
Consideration of a discussion regarding BESE member communication and collaboration. We need a motion to receive.
Preston and Belinda Davis. Thank you. First BESE slide, please take note. We're here talking about collaboration and engagement amongst us as board members, and also not only amongst us, but with our Department of Ed, and how can we move forward with a higher level of collaboration with our stakeholders, our legislators, et cetera. So this is the beginning of what are our next steps in that. So definitely we want your participation and input, but we want to be proactive and more clearly and have a more clearly articulated communication management plan with board members and stakeholders. How do we ensure connection to the leadership team? How do we have a stronger high-level communication collaboration amongst board members? And also collaboration extending to legislators and advocates. Also, we know that there are public individuals that like to communicate with board members and also with BESE. And the communication plan, via board member referrals, we'll talk a little bit about that. Board members may submit agenda items request 18 days prior to scheduled committee, and the communication regarding constituent requests and responses. So in saying that, the item with communication, Shan wrote this up, which was a very good idea, about sharing this information with you, and how do we go about the next steps with board member referrals. And Shan, would you like to take that on?
There's a lot of topics that you all might feel passionate about or you want to discuss, or there's a particular program that you would like to share with the board, and you could do that via the referral process. And to do that, you would email me, copy Sandy, 18 days prior to the meeting, and we can either add an item to the agenda or piggyback it onto something that's already on the agenda. So I wasn't sure if the new members were aware of this process. And it's very good to do this process as opposed to making a request at a board meeting for the next meeting. It's really good to have it ahead of time so that the department can be prepared and have the information at the next meeting, as opposed to making the motion at a meeting and then having to wait a month for whatever it is you're asking for example. So we just thought it was important for the new members, if you didn't know the process, to be within that 18 days.
Any questions in regards to that particular line item? All right, the next slide. Committee chairs communicate with committee members. I felt strongly that for the distribution.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
The last bullet on that, which was communication with constituent requests and responses. I know many of us get the same emails, that if a concerned citizen or whatever wants to bring something to our attention, and will email all of us. And sometimes it may be specific to an area that we can respond easily. Or sometimes the response might entail something of a little bit higher level, or a policy, or we want to make sure that the response is accurate in terms of what our policies are and the next steps. So how would we all suggest maybe these mass emails that we get that go to all of us in terms of a response that would come maybe from leadership here, through Shan, or should we all individually respond? Because I think we have faced that. If it's something that we know from people, I'm not talking about those personal responses, I'm talking about those emails that every single one of us, you take the ignored, but you'd like the response coming from the entity itself in relation to what our policies and procedures are. So how should we think of that?
Sure.
Well, different board members will email me sometimes. Preston, you did it this week, Sandy does it quite often. And sometimes it's hard to see exactly who's been copied on the email as well. So what I usually do is I will respond, if Sandy refers a person to me, she will email the person back and say, I'm referring this to the executive director. If the board members are copied, evidently copied, then she could copy you all and let you all know that I'm working on it. If not, then I draft a response and usually BCC board members if it seems like more than one person has been copied. But I'd be happy to work with you in any other way that you would like. See if that's not perfect.
So at the time, we can all get, the copy of it, so we'll know what the response is.
Yes.
Yeah, most of the
And
time,
that someone has responded to that.
correct, but most of the time, I've noticed that it's just sent to me, and we don't know, it's just, we don't know if Preston, like, if someone didn't know if Preston got it or you received it, and how do we respond to that to make certain that all of you have that information?
I would recommend just sending it to me regardless, so that I know that other people did get it. Because I typically respond to everything that I get. But I'm not necessarily aware that you received it as well, so maybe just forward it.
I would just say that it's worked great, so Sandy, probably the first month I was on board, so that's a great way to respond, is loop in Shan, and it's really worked beautifully for me, and you've done a great job, very timely. I don't think Shan sleeps, she responds to my emails at midnight, when I send them to her at midnight, but that really does work. I guess the only thing is, it's just that when we get the group ones, I guess Sandy being president would be the one, maybe when we get the group email, and then go in and share it, so that we know that someone responded.
Exactly. So that's really.
Okay, perfect, thank you for bringing that forward, appreciate that. And anyone else have any other add-on to this? All right, get that cleared up, perfect. Let's talk about committee chairs communicating with the committee members. If you note here that we have 4 committees, 4 committee chairs, and then we've got members on these committees. And in the past, there were times I felt as a member, like, okay, what's going on? How do we communicate here? What do I expect when I get to a BESE meeting? And so what's happened, what I'd like to see here is, I think we're going to start, like, and Kate's going to chime in a second here, with the superintendent LGE team connecting with the committee chair. And we've done some of that just recently. And also we've gotten information from Shan's office and also, is it Nikki sending us, if you're a committee chair, you're going to get accustomed to getting information from her. But we want to go deeper than that, than having information coming from the BESE office. We're wanting some collaboration from Superintendent Bromley's office along with his team, sharing information or whatever is necessary with the committee chair, and having that collaboration, and in turn, the chairperson reach out to your committee members. Then you starting a dialogue of talking of this is what you need to prepare for the meeting that's coming forward. And you're not going to, well, should we take this vote? No, this is not, this is sharing information that's coming forward, right, Shannon? Yeah. So, Dr. Roman, would you like to share what your thoughts are on moving forward with the committee chair people?
Sure, thank you, Sandy, for that. Before I do that, I would like to just simply acknowledge it's Black History Month, and would like to just acknowledge the struggles, contributions, achievements of specifically Black educators through our state. My first principal when I worked at J.S. Clark Middle School in Caddo Parish was Mr. Lewis McCullough, and was a stoic presence, and really enjoyed the opportunity to work forward and learn from him. Also I know it's not especially fitting for BESE, but it's cold outside, it's going to get colder. And school buildings have to respond to cold weather, including pipes and heaters and boilers and all those things. So my principal hat and superintendent hat helps me remember that plant managers and janitors and facilities teams, they have a tough week ahead. So just remembering them. So Sandy, you asked me to talk a little bit about communication here. I know you wanted to talk about BESE to BESE communication, but I'm happy to share out department to BESE member communication. You know, communication is always a challenge, and everyone can always say, well, communication needs to be better, and I typically always agree with that. But some of the things, you had asked me to talk about some of the things that we do in terms of communication, so I'll just handle all that right here within that. So just a listing, everyone is, I believe everyone is included on the newsletters. I send everyone every weekend a note of just a few things during the week that I think are most pressing. Shannon helps me with that, to get that out to everyone. Sometimes that's Friday, sometimes it's Saturday, sometimes it's Sunday, but we try to get that out every weekend. We have a host of leader calls throughout the month. We do the system call, we do the system leader roundtable, we do chief academic officer calls, we do calls for various positions throughout the state, like technology coordinators, and a whole list of other positions. We do office hours, so all of our departments have office hours now where individuals in the field can call in for office hours. And so you're invited to all of those calls. And in fact, I think they're quite helpful, whenever you are there, because I've had conversations with many of you afterwards about some of the things that you've heard individuals talk about or want to know. So if you're not getting those invites, let me know, and we can make sure you get those. I have a officer call weekly with leadership of the board. We usually hold those on Thursday afternoons and talk about the week and things that are upcoming. Our assistant superintendents are readily available, as well as our chief of staff, for any specific questions that you have or any particular way that we can serve you on an issue. One of the things that we're going to do as we move into this calendar year for the committees is, prior to the agenda going out, and Sandy and I talked about this, we think this could be helpful. We're going to meet with the committee chair, and we're going to walk through the entire agenda with the committee chair, so that the committee chair will have a better sense of everything on that agenda, have the opportunity to ask questions, and see what else the committee chair might need from us. And then from there, our hope would be that the committee chair would then be able to have communication with the members of that particular committee around those particular agenda items or concerns or other opportunities. So we'll be doing that. I'm always available to any one of you for a phone call, a text message, email, or a visit if you need me. There are times I call on some of you for specific things. If I haven't, something that has to do with a Catholic school, I may call Mr. Rock. If it's something about mentor, we may call Ms. Ellis. And so we try to keep that open line of communication. Those are just a couple of examples. And if you ever need me in your BESE district, you know, if there's an event, there's something that you need us to represent the department, let us know. But those are, along with, when we send out press releases, we've also started sending you an embroidered copy in advance of that going out to the public. So those are some of the things that we do. We try to be as responsive as we possibly can, but, you know, one can always argue there's communication should be better. And if there are specific ideas around that, we're happy to listen and see what we can do to help. But, you know, I know our team is, I mean, just personally and professionally, they're happy to communicate. They're happy to hear what you have to say. They want to know. So we're always there.
Thank you. And of course, we've heard tremendous positive feedback from the public in regards to being able to have that communication with the department and also with BESE members. They're pleased, they're excited that you're involved, you're engaged, you're talking to your constituents and within your district and even beyond. So thank you for that. But there's always room for improvement, room within us, room within leadership to make that happen. And thank you. I can't tell you how honored I am to serve with this board and where you're heading and where you want the state to head. And we can only do this by improving the collaboration and engagement. I see something, yes, Mr. Rock.
Just want to comment after Dr. Bowman finished. Just yesterday, Dr. Mujay and his team hosted 2 separate Zoom sessions for the Catholic superintendent. And we chose to do it in 2 sessions so that we would have a core that most of them serve on the non-public commission. Very, very, very informative, helpful. Quite just wonderful. And so I just said, of course, I spoke to all of them after the meeting, and they would be impressed.
Thank you for that. Which makes me think of Dr. Bromley, you may want to inform the members about the wonderful open house you had for the legislators. And these are those points of interest that we're trying to improve on and to reach out to have that collaboration and that partnership. Would you like to?
Yeah, sure. Well, first, I just want to reaffirm, like, if there's ever some kind of communication that you want me to do differently, I mean, just let me know. I don't know anything at this point that you've shared, but certainly let me know. Yeah, so last week we had the opportunity, I thought it worked out really well. We invited the members of the Senate and the House Education Committees to participate in a department open house. And so we too avoided any forum issues and all that, but we just spent a couple of hours with them talking through where we are as a state, some of the places where we would like to go. And it was really good. We had good engagement, we had good questions, and I'm thankful that we were able to have that specifically before session starts, because I think those legislators now have additional information about where we stand as a state educationally and what we are trying to do. I mean, Sandy, it may be appropriate, I mean, Chairman Garibala is here and was on one of those sessions. I mean, he may have some remarks about this or, you know.
Absolutely. You may have the floor.
No, I thought it was great. Kate, I told you that already. I told you too, Sandy, that it gave us a lot of information. I was a little disappointed with the number of people from our side that were on the call. I thought we would have had more participation. And that was one of the questions I had for you, Kate. Did you have more participation in the 2 calls?
Well, I, like you, would have loved to have had more participation, but, you know, legislators are busy. But we did have, one of the calls had more legislators than the other call. We had 2 calls. And one of the calls, we had even more questions than the other call. But, you know, we're going to follow up with everyone and see, you know, how we might, you know, if they missed out, what we might can do to shore up that miss.
Sure, and I'll probably have more comments when we get to the next agenda item. But it was great to reach out and give us information as to what you guys are doing. I get questions from my members all the time as to, you know, what's the department doing with this, what's the department doing with that. And for you guys to put together a call like that certainly is a help, and I'm glad you did it. on the former committee that I chaired and on other committees that I participated with, we didn't get that type of communication. So I think it's great, and I think it's a great tool to keep us informed as to what you guys are doing. I appreciate you.
Thank you. And there's more to come. Representative Garofalo, leadership and I have communicated quite a bit since early January, at least once a week. We thank Ashley and Kara, and along with Dr. Bromley, about what is our vision, where are we heading, what are we hearing from you as board members with the collaboration, with the communication. What is it that they want to know and to make us better? And one other item was, how do we reach out to our legislators and stakeholders, advocates, et cetera? And so we have a plan in place, and we're going to start off, hopefully in the next few days, about reaching out to Representative Garofalo's committee members, the Senate with Senator Cleo Fields and his members. What is it that we as BESE, including you, can do to help our legislators understand our goal and our vision, and how can we partner? So these are things that we have in store, along with, I see Wes, you're here somewhere. What's he? Oh, there you are. With the Superintendent's Association and the School Board Association, we're branching out to reach out, to partner. And I do see Marcus, you're here. And with the Director of Government Relations from the Louisiana Association of Educators. These are individuals that are coming forward to say, we want to partner, we want to get together, we want to get on this this journey that we can start seeing things together and moving our students forward with improving education. And yes, Dr. Davis?
I have a question about attending phone calls or meetings that are going on virtually. So I have found the leadership Zoom calls very helpful, as well as the Superintendent's Association, so I learn a lot by listening in on those phone calls. When it comes to the leadership team of BESE meeting, and I have no idea if this is legal given the kind of restraints we have on the forums, but is it possible for BESE members to listen in but not participate in leadership calls so that we can stay up to speed, especially during the legislative session when things are moving quickly? Is that legal?
You may be ahead of what the next item is on the agenda. And I appreciate your question on that, but let's talk about, because we will talk about that, the leadership policy. Any other questions on the committee assignments? Chair people, if you're good with connecting with your members and having this collaboration. Thank you. All right, the next slide, if you notice.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Dr. Leger, we had talked about a specific day that we were going to do that with the leaders of the committee and Mr. Grimion. Did we settle with it? We're looking at Wednesday or Thursday before the agenda goes out that week? Okay.
Yes.
So members who are chairs of the committee, look for an invitation for us to come for basically Wednesday or Thursday before the agendas go out that week. And we can certainly work on your schedule with that.
And the email from our staff usually comes the Friday before you receive your packets. We kind of pushed it closer to when you're going to get your packet so that you could go through your packet and refer to the summary that Nikki sends or Kevin.
That is the chair.
This is the chair. Yeah. Kevin sends it to AF and then Nikki sends it to the other three committees. But you can push that sooner if you would like. It's a breakdown of what the item is, what the recommendation is, just a quick summary, not a long, lengthy summary. And any other notes, something that might be, included in the statement. So we could definitely send that out sooner than the project report. If you would like, and we could maybe piggyback with Kate.
Yes, Mr. Castor.
One of the things that's been helpful for me is Dr. Pearson, we and I have a regularly scheduled monthly, bi-weekly telephone call. And that's helpful in framing what's actually on the agenda, as opposed to just reacting to it. So initially, we had to get the agenda, and it's gone out, that's about 2 hours the day before. And I felt like, at least in the committee chair, I was simply reacting to an agenda that had already been prepared. But this new communications approach, meeting every couple of weeks, certainly makes me feel like I'm involved in deciding what's on the agenda, reframing it, being able to address issues that one side may be missing, the department side or the BESE side. So the bi-weekly discussions, I will say for me, just 30 minutes just to check in on what's happening. So it allows me, at least as chair, to be able to see issues maybe 2 or 3 months down the road, not just what's happening in the next week and a half or so.
Yeah, it's so impressive to see that work happening, and that's what's going to happen with you as new chairs. And I'm present, you were chair prior too, so you're seeing the development there, and it's so helpful. So now you take that information and you share it with your members.
I'm glad you said that. That raises another question. So what I've always been a little bit confused about is, and it works fine, but I'm never asked the question. So we have a committee, the chair of the committee. And when we meet, it's the whole board voting. And so I never really can tell what the function of the committee is at the actual committee
Good
board meeting
point.
versus the actual board, because everybody has the ability to vote, make motions as if it were a committee.
And don't be alone, because we've asked other people, but Shan, can you give us some information on that?
Yeah, it's just in the code that, there's certain committee members, but all BESE members participate in the vote for committee action. And it years and years ago, it was, the committees were definitely more involved with their committees, and we kind of strayed away from that. And like you said, the board members just started reacting to what was on the agenda as opposed to being in the loop and beginning it. I will say the process used to be, and Jim can speak to this, it was a referral process. So every item that was going to be on a future agenda would be on the board agenda months ahead of time. So they would say, so the agenda would note all of the bulletin revisions, and of course there'd be other things, would note to be referred to a committee by the board way ahead of time. So you would know the upcoming items that months in advance. And then the committees would get involved at that point. And then it's just evolved, I guess, technology and everything else into just,
One of the reasons I asked the question is Sammy's good recommendation of the chairs, then reaching out to the committee members. But it's almost a bit of a technicality, given that it really is everybody seemingly participating. And so we do that. I'll give credit to Ronnie, and that is, I've come accustomed that when the agenda hits, that I can expect a phone call to Ronnie Morris, because he's going to call, and he's calling every committee chair, I'm sure, and saying, hey, you've got this on your agenda, walk me through it, tell me what the issues are, tell me if I'm seeing anything. And so that, and he wasn't on the committee, my committee, but he would always call and say, let's talk about these things. And I would say that was helpful for me, because I had to make sure that
Step up your game.
call from Ronnie,
Yeah.
and I was prepared to answer his
Thank you,
questions.
Ron.
So I'll just mention that as something that then.
Sure. Anybody else would like to comment on this? Yes,
So are we questioning the need for members of the committee? As I know that even locally, in most government bodies, they do things in different ways. Some people have a committee structure where only the committee meets and makes recommendations to a full board. Even in my local school system, we get away with that because what would happen, a committee would meet, when it's recommended to the full board wants to hear everything. So they didn't necessarily accept a recommendation from 2 or 3 people, or 3 or 4 who were on the committee. So it became almost a redundancy. You go through a small committee and you go through everything. So we went to a structure that I'm thinking is similar to what BESE has, where we have a committee of the whole. So the entire board meets for the committee meetings like we do. And there are chairs for each committee, but no additional members on them, because the entire board constitutes some type of membership of everything. And it's hashed out at the committee of the whole meeting, and then referred to the full board for, action consideration. So, I want Preston, as a committee chair, would like to make sure that committee members know, but everybody on the board is going to have similar, I guess, questions and briefings. So is there any consideration for the future of looking at that structure? I mean, we can change it immediately if we want to, but looking at that structure, maybe that's something that we could look into to see if we want to.
And I would say that it's sort of what I was getting at, and thanks for fleshing that out a little bit more, Doris, because I feel like my point about Ronnie is that everybody is engaged. And I don't want to change the fact that committees meet, everybody gets to hear, engage, put on, and then it makes the next day so much easier. That works beautifully. So by no means am I suggesting that. I just wonder if it's a little maybe unnecessary to have, if they maybe just in the code that we're doing it because something says that we should do it, then I would question why it doesn't say that. But if the committee members aren't functioning, have a role beyond every other member, just isn't necessary. Because
Well, and you bring up a very good point, and the reason why I brought this up was because of a past agenda on a certain committee. And a member said, I'm part of this committee, but I really don't know what I'm going in for when we have this meeting. Shouldn't I know some things about what's taking place? I said, well, you got a good point. I'm just thinking about that. Yeah, the chairperson knew about what's going to take place, but the members of that committee didn't. And there were some interesting items on that agenda. So that's why it brought me to this. Makes sense? So, any other member? Jim, you thinking?
I would ask, what is the problem that you're trying to solve?
I'm trying, let's go
I
ahead.
know Preston has pointed out it's unusual that we have a committee of the whole, but then you have 3 people named as committee members. And it is unusual, but I don't think you're really going to
It makes it
change
complex
much
for the chair as well, too.
in practicality if you change the committee to just a chairman and no members, or change it to the chairman with 11 members.
Yeah, or, because now another, and you brought up a good point, which I am aware of, that if the chairman at that moment cannot serve, coming in the day before, saying, hey, I'm ill, or I have to leave early, then the member of that committee steps up into the chairman role.
But even then, I don't think we have it designated anywhere which of the 2 remaining members become the chair.
No.
So we don't have rules
No.
worked out to solve every problem. And by the same token,
Right.
I don't think making rules for everything is going to solve every problem.
No, but I was trying to hear out what members were saying. Hey, I want to know more about that committee, and how can we engage more, collaborate more? This came forward, so I said, okay, well, this might be another way of communicating. So,
And, yeah, and it sounds,
It's like-
It's about the communication piece.
Yeah.
You know, like, if you're gonna communicate, get the first word, and then you communicate with your members, then the members reach out and communicate with everyone else. Is that the next step? I don't know. But I think that's the piece, is that what's the communication
yeah,
process?
engage.
And right now, it's the committee chair is, and typically you, as president, have appointed people to be chair when they are the most interested person on BESE in that subject. So they, enjoy hearing more, getting more information, and getting it more in depth than maybe most of the BESE members, maybe not all, but most. And then if somebody has a question, like Ronnie has done, they can call the chair. It seems to be working pretty well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, is that reaching out and knowing that that would be the next step.
Yeah.
And you're reaching out, not talking about specific items or recommendations, but just procedural and what's coming up and.
To have that communication.
You're not,
And
discussing
different
your opinion.
committees might be different. On one committee, if Preston and somebody else on the committee would like, if the other official two members of the committee, or one of them, wouldn't be on the call where the superintendent or his staff is giving the in-depth call, then I don't think the superintendent would have a problem with that, having more than just the committee chair in there. I would just suggest taking it on a case-by-case basis, lean towards more communication, which is what you're doing, but I wouldn't try to make a rule that is going to address every problem. I would do it on a case-by-case
No, that's
basis.
not what this is about, addressing a problem, is the communication of, agenda items and to have some conversations with board members. I get it, yeah, Preston?
Yeah, this is a helpful discussion, so if nothing else, this is a retreat, and make sure we're all on the same page, so thanks to everybody for their comments. So I was appointed to administrative and finance, which I'm greatly interested and appreciated. For that particular committee, who serves on the task force? I know this should be a question for that, but will committee members also serve on the task force? So that one, for example, is some different value in serving on the committee, other than simply being the chair. So that's an example where there is a distinction there.
Yes, Ms.
I would suggest that leaving it like it is right now. Let's try the communication piece as y'all have described it. And if there are other tweaks we want to make as we go forward, then we can take a look at it.
Absolutely.
So we're
It's
looking
really
at those calls
correct.
with the chair people, and then who then will, inform committee members and whatever variation that looks like. And let's see how they go.
Absolutely, superintendent, it's your choice, as committee chairs, you go for it, however you see fit. Thank you so much, I appreciate that. Well, let's move on to the next slide, which involves members and leadership discussions. And Belinda, we're going to answer that today, and it pretty much states what you just mentioned, Preston, about leadership, Jim. In my thought, as moving forward this year with bringing and engaging our members into collaboration and seeing the vision ahead, I felt like, why is it that certain members at appropriate time, not on our leadership call with Ashley, Kira, and I, and then we bring in Superintendent Rowley along with Shan. And so we discussed that, thought it was a good idea, a great idea to rotate you in, chairman's in. When it is, let's use MFP. MFP is going to, really be a topic coming up February 18th. So leadership will discuss that moving forward. Here's the meeting coming forward. Let's bring in Ms. Loche on this conference call that we have and talk and discuss to be on the same page. What's discussed, she can move forward if she deems appropriate to mention it to her members. Recently, a perfect example with preparing for the legislative process that we thought was the number one item on our agenda, that legislation's coming in come March, April. How can we be prepared without a glitch moving forward? And we have been working for weeks on end, sharing information, talking through it. What are the next steps? And I strongly felt that our expert here with longevity on the BESE board was Jim. Jim has had such intense experience and qualifications on helping. And I thought, Jim, can you do this for us? Can you join us in leadership, walking legislative process through, making sure that every step along the way is appropriate? Will we have glitches? Yes. Can we fix it? Yes. And so Jim stepped in on our conversations, and also not only with leadership, but with Dr. Bromley, walking this through and helping us manage what does it look like moving forward with our process. So those are the types of examples that we want to have with leadership calls. When we're moving forward with charters or whatever the items may be, Preston will step in and so forth. And if not the chair, then we move in Melinda to hear the conversations, how we're talking through, what's the new next items on moving forward into our year. Does that help, Melinda?
It does. I guess my question would be, is it possible for members to, even if we are not participating in this conversation, to listen in so that we are aware of what is happening during the legislative session or in other matters? So I listen in on the superintendent's phone calls, and I don't know how many other BESE members are also listening in, and that does not violate open meeting laws, I'm assuming, even though we're all listening in possibly. So is it possible to listen in on those phone conversations even if we are not participating in the phone call?
Okay. I'll defer to Shan that has the policy.
When the calls and things are being discussed, it's not positions or, it's not like voting, obviously. There cannot be more than 5 on the call. And Kate brings a lot of things to leadership to get direction. So I don't think it's possible for more than 5 to be on the call. I don't know how you determine which 5, even if you're just listening.
So I wonder about that. I'm thinking that the reason all of us can participate in the superintendent's call, because I see when I'm on, other board members popping in. The distinction that I think Dr. Davis points out is that we're not participating in leading on a conversation at all. We're just simply observers. We're listening in. So webinar, almost, from an analogous standpoint. I think what you're describing is something more akin to, this is a meeting that's taking place, and we simply observe. I don't know the answer to it. I just think that
When you listen in to the superintendent, it's not business that you will be taking action on, ferreting out problems with a specific policy direction. Well, that's something that the board is going to vote on eventually. So that is why that.
Alex, excuse me.
I'm not prepared to.
I know Alex is the attorney that represents us when we have a question. I don't know if you can answer this now, but if you can you research it and get back with us? But we'd love to know.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I can look into. My initial thoughts are in agreement with what Shannon's telling you. If it's things that BESE is not going to be taking any action on, it's okay for as many board members as possible to be on, versus things that you all will be called on or may be called on to vote up or down at some point later on. But I'll look more into the issue early and get back to you.
Appreciate that. Jim?
If you're looking for a way to even further separate what's happening at the phone call and the decision-making process, which is, I think, what the open meetings law is trying to achieve, maybe you could take the call and then let BESE members listen to the tape of the call, and then you certainly are not, if you're listening to the tape call, participating in that kind of decision-making process. Maybe, an issue maybe worth further researching.
I think it's not so much your interaction, it's your hearing what someone else's opinion is about it. So that you're not actually going into the meeting, discussing it organically, and that might sway your opinion based on something you even heard, even if you're not speaking. That is what open meetings is about, it's hearing the item at the same time and discussing it at the same time.
Dr. Davis?
No, I mean, if it's illegal, it's illegal. I just, you know, I guess I'm just interested in making sure that I'm as on top of everything as I can possibly be.
Absolutely.
You know, especially from a legislative perspective as when we move forward, because I'm intensely interested in the legislative process.
Absolutely, yes, we all are, absolutely. Thank you for that. I appreciate your question. And we'll get an answer to you somehow, Alex. And Shane, please work on that, and Shane will deliver that information to you. And we'll know how to move forward. The last step, as far as for leadership, we do want to make some effort in reaching out. And I've asked Ashley and Karen to assist me in reaching out to you and having that collaboration. And you have all times that you can reach out to us, but we're going to make points of interest to where we will either text, email, or give you a call, checking in. Is there anything out there that we can help you with, work on, and join forces moving forward? Any other questions? Ashley, anything more with leadership or that you can knowledge of? You're good? Anyone else? If you think of anything else that we can do to improve the process, please don't hesitate, let us know. Or if you attempt to, we move forward and there's some glitches, some gaps, please let us know, don't hesitate. We'd be glad to work through that and improve our process of collaboration. If there are no other questions or discussions, comments, all in favor, move forward. Any objections? Motion carried. Next item, please. Sorry.
Next item, consideration of a discussion regarding the BESE legislative process on motion to receive.
Motion. Mr. Rock, Ashley, second. We will have Dr. Bromley and his team, along with Jim, as you've heard me before, talk about the legislative process. They've teamed together and they will walk you through this process and how BESE and the LWB will manage the next steps along with the legislative process. Dr. Bromley.
Yeah, thank you. So just before I get started, you should have a piece of paper that says legislative process. I think it's two things stapled together. So we're really approaching this in a couple of different ways. One is internally as the agency, how we will handle the session. We'll hear a little bit about that momentarily. But also Sandy had asked that I put together a process to help with the way that BESE approaches the session as well. So Sandy, as well as the officers, Jim, myself, Dr. Legier, his team have worked together with Shan for some time to try and come up with a process that we think might be both legal and effective as we go into the session. And so we were happy to try and put this together for you, Sandy, and we'll walk through that right now. So if you'll bear with me, we'll just track it down the page. But first of all, our legislative team will create a watch list of all bills that would affect early childhood education, elementary and secondary education, and we will communicate this information to the BESE officers, the executive director, and then all members will have access to this bill tracker, which has all of the bills listed as well as information about those particular bills. The department and our staff, we will work with bill authors, we will work with committee members and other legislators so that they have an understanding from our viewpoint of what some of the pros of the legislation might be, what some of the cons might be, all of the information that they might need in order to try and best make informed decisions. On all of the bills that affect early childhood education, elementary and secondary education, where we think it's pertinent for us to be at the table formally as an agency, we will do that, and we will do that under white card. We will not be submitting a red or a green card, but our agency will be submitting white card.
Just on that, I can wait, I just wanted to ask a question on the white card concept. That okay now, or you should always?
Whatever.
Let me go through, yeah.
So as part of that testimony, we will make sure that committee members have the information that they need from the department to make informed decisions. And also, while we are there under white card testimony, our intent is to give a position of BESE leadership on that particular item. We will also host a bill review session prior to the beginning of the session with all members of BESE. During the session on Monday morning and Wednesday afternoons, we will hold sessions with our leadership of BESE to go over all of the particular bills and the impacts of the bills during that time. And on Friday, Dr. Davis, this is a little to your point, on Friday, we will have the ability for all BESE members to also, without violating any quorum rules, hear about all of the bills and what's going on, where they stand, information about the bills. And so we will commit, our office will commit to doing that every Friday morning. The legislative office will also draft any fiscal notes that are required if funding is required for particular bills, so that information is available to the legislature. If there are particular items that we need legally to happen as an agency, we will work to secure bill sponsors for those issues if we need to do something in order to comply in any particular way with something legally. So we would secure authors for those particular bills. We will, I'm moving to the next page. The Department's Legislative Affairs Office recommends that BESE leadership continue to take positions on track legislation on behalf of the board. And we also have created a decision matrix for those considerations, and the matrix for questions in terms of decision-making. Does the bill help advance the priority of BESE and/or the state superintendent, the agency? Is the bill necessary to position or achieve stronger outcomes for students? Does the data support the need for the bill? Is there a fiscal note on the bill or a financial cost that limits the bill's ability to pass? Who supports and opposes the bill? What is the bill's viability for passage? Question or concern of legal ramifications or constitutionality? Is there a better way to achieve the desired outcome other than this legislation? Is there something that can be done under BESE's purview? Will BESE support or oppose, hurt or help the bill? So these are some of the BESE responsibilities. And so then BESE has a few different options. They can support, you can support a particular bill. You can do that under green card. You can actually actively talk with legislators, testify in committee, or a combination of two of the, or more of those things. You can oppose a bill under a red card. You can actively talk to legislators about this bill. You can testify in committee, or a combination of two or more, or you can take no position on a particular bill. Pursuant to this process, BESE leadership will communicate to our department BESE positions on particular bills, and that's the BESE leadership positions on these bills. And if we move to public testimony, which is the next gray section, for continued clarity on official board positions, individual BESE members lobbying on their own outside of an official BESE position or different position than that of the official BESE leadership position should state, I am not representing an official position of BESE and am representing myself. And then in regards to public meetings, our office will also provide updates in March, April, and June at the Administration Finance Committee around legislation. And so this is what we worked on with leadership, with Mr. Garvey, with Shan and our team. And President, if it's okay with you, I'd like Dr. Leger to just make a few remarks about like how we work through this internally, and then we can move on to the next thing. But before he does that, I also want to introduce Ethan Alonso, who has joined Dr. Leger's team. Ethan, if you'll wave. And so we're happy to have Ethan also with us to help us through the legislative session. So, Dr. Leger.
Thanks, Dr. Dorman. I just wanted to kind of dig in just a little bit on.
Dr. Leger.
I'm sorry.
You might come forward, please.
You have that teacher voice though.
That's true, I don't think you need it.
Thanks. Just wanted to dig in a little bit on the internal process of how we plan to do things internally. So when bills are filed and we see that they are relevant to our scope of the work that we do, early childhood ed, K-12 education, the plan is to circulate those bills to the relevant offices, teams, academics, EIO, career and tech, and of course our legal teams, to get their input and feedback to see if they have any concerns, issues, questions that legislators should ponder, or maybe suggestions on how to improve the bill. Once we get that feedback and input, the plan is to contact the bill's author, to have a conversation with the bill's author, to see, if there are concerns or issues, that if there's a way that the bill can be better postured so that the concerns or issues would be addressed, or maybe even to improve the bill. So that's our internal process. And I wanted to publicly thank Chairman Garofalo for being here. He has been actively engaged and very supportive of making decisions that are in the best interest of children.
Yeah. So this is very helpful, but one question I have is just understanding in terms of possible legislation that the department or BESE may be interested in having presented to the legislature sponsoring the bill. We've got a lot of topics from a policy standpoint that perhaps should be law as opposed to policy. If there is such an issue, one, how do we advance that? When do we have that conversation? So now is February 12th. If there is a particular topic that we would like to have the legislature consider as law as opposed to policy, walk me through how that happens and the timing of when that would happen.
Okay. So as a department, we look at those policies or those statutes that we feel should be revised in some form or fashion for us to be more effective. And we have already secured some bill authors to help us with some things like, for example, criminal background checks. We're going to need to address that process. And so we draft legislation and then work to find a bill's author. Now, this is a shorter session and it makes it a little bit tougher because each legislator only has 5 non-fiscal bills that they can file. But up to this point, we feel pretty confident and comfortable with those bills that we are going to be introducing and working with legislators.
So the second part of the question was, so that's from the department standpoint. So let's say, let's pick on, since I started picking on you this morning, that Mr. Morris says, look, I'm really interested in a technology bill that he believes should be advanced through the legislature. And as a BESE member, wants to have something along beyond policy and would like for our body, BESE, the department, to take something to present to the legislature, much the way you described it with the department. how would we as BESE members do that without, of course, going off on our own?
I'm sorry, what did you guys say? I didn't hear the last part.
Without us independently going off on our own
Oh, okay.
to try and get this accomplished.
Ray basically was asking, can the department help?
Yes, absolutely, but the department is one of, we're service oriented. And so just like our offices, Ryan and Ethan work with our different programs, different offices saying, you know, is there anything in policy or statute that we can help and support? The same thing goes with the BESE members as well. You know, if it's Ryan or you or Ashley or anybody else wants to, that has an idea in mind of how we can improve what we do with K-12 education, will come to us with the idea. We'll help shape and put together a bill that, and then help find an author to do that.
So, and just to finish that point though, from a timing standpoint, so look at it again, when things need to be presented. If we were, should we have some sort of internal policy that says, look, here's when we, the department, need to hear from BESE if there are any specific topics or bills that you would like our input on, so that gives you enough time. One, it tells us there is a time line that we're following, and you've got something that you have an interest in, you need to probably get it to us by this point in time to give us adequate time to actually prepare something, to find an author and those sorts of things. Sure, give us some guidance on that.
Well, and I would defer to the president as far as maybe we can work something out with the leadership team on developing some type of process to do that.
And then the last question I'll yield the floor is, if there is such a bill, let's say, we'll just keep using the Ronnie Moore's analogy about technology, because once again, technology. But if there was such a technology bill, and Mr. Morris is like really interested in that, and he said, look, I really want to do this, but all the rest of us think it's a terrible idea. How then?
Is that even possible?
Not possible. Not possible. That's why it's a great analogy. This is very hypothetical and not possible. But it's now just Mr. Morris. How do we get this to a point before we formally engage the department, because they're 11 of us, and that one board member may not reflect the opinion of the entire body? That may not be for you, but I just sort of tossed that out.
Well, I would address that by saying that we have a couple of bullets in the process that we put together that we suggested that if individual BESE members would like to testify, that the suggestion is to offer that statement that you're not representing BESE, but yourself. The second part of that is that, look, again, I can't reiterate enough how our department, our office is one of service and support. And so we are more than happy at any time, any day, to work with you if there's a bill that you support or you strongly oppose and you need more information, that's what we're here for. So we'll be glad to have those conversations with any of you about digging into the details or making connections with legislators, bill authors. So,
and all of that is consistent with the information only reference. We can do all of that, and another department can simply provide information. So,
correct, yeah. The department, as an agency, white card, information only. Yes.
President, if you don't mind, I'd like Dr. Bromley to say something, I'll add to it.
Yeah, I was just going to share, Mr. Castile, that we tend to, between Ryan and Keith and myself, we tend to know legislators' interest. And so, we're happy to support partnering you with a particular legislator if you know the intent of your bill and where that might align with a particular legislator's area of interest. And so, I think this process still comes into play afterwards. So if it's simply you have this idea, whether it's your great idea or Ronnie's terrible idea, we still have a process in place that would all work itself out. So we're happy to help you identify authors for bills.
thank you, sir.
I guess, and my thought was, I'm listening to this thinking, Ronnie has, so sorry, Ronnie. You're the head of our close it off today. If you're interested in a bill, what right do we have as BESE members to stop him from having a bill or wanting to move forward? I just feel that that's his right. Okay, so you'll have to help us with that process. And he feels strongly about what he wants as a bill. How can members say, well, you can't go that route? So I think that's where we're going to lean on the department to walk any one of you through. I see some hands. Yes, Ms. Fletcher,
Okay, and I was going to comment on Preston's last point, I believe, but he brought it up. And I was of the same thought process here. Looking at the last sentence of the department responsibilities, where the department's legislative office will draft proposed legislation and secure the responses to address department operational issues requiring immediate attention. And he, just said, you're in the works, you're doing some of that right now, and reaching out to people. For informational purposes, I, as a BESE member, would kind of like to know what is the department reaching out to, what type of legislation, and why, so that we know that this is coming forward, because much of this will then come back to us after, if there's a law drafted, that we will have to establish policy. So on the front end, I would like to be aware of what the department is proposing. And, just for informational, knowledge purposes, and for our input purposes. And going to Coral Ronnie over here, who's speaking a lot this morning without hearing his voice. But,
There's a bullseye here somewhere.
I know, I'm telling
It's on your back.
If one of us has a passion that maybe the other 8, 9, 10 of us don't share, I think we have to be very careful that it is not a BESE position. You're right as an individual, but representing the entire group or having it come from the Department of BESE is a whole different kind of ballgame. So back to that first bullet or the first part of the agenda that we talked about, the communication among us, I think, is very critical. So that we as BESE members, when legislators call us or we're talking in different groups, I think we need to know what's being proposed by the department. We also need to know if we are officially or unofficially taking a stance on anything. So that piece, that communication is very critical. And maybe for the future, because this legislative session, it's coming up really, really quick. But over the course, when this one's finished, and as we proceed through the year, if we have issues that we feel we need to bring up in the next session, we'll have several months, that can be fleshed out at our meetings, where we would then be asking, we would get an idea of what we're looking for, and ask the department to draft things that maybe we are very, very interested in, and not wait until right before the session to see these things. So it may have to be part of the ongoing process over the course of the year. But I would like, to see what we're proposing right now, what do you think?
all right, thank you, good points. Yes, Dr. Davis.
So I guess I have some real questions about this policy from a democratic standpoint, because I don't understand why, if Ronnie's technology bill that he has pursued,
Sorry,
and
Ronnie.
we, for whatever reason, as a BESE leadership team, right? So we're not even allowing, in most instances, this entire board to voice their opinion about a piece of legislation. We're allowing our officers to do that in a discussion that we are not privy to as a board, right, to make a position on the bill. And so in theoretical terms, our leadership could decide not to support Ronnie's bill And then this policy prevents Ronnie from going and testifying on behalf of his own bill as a member of BESE. And it's perfectly fine for, us to have a card that says the leadership team of BESE does not support a bill, but to stifle Ronnie's ability to, as a BESE member, try to serve the needs of his constituents as an elected official, to me is problematic. I mean, I'm not an elected official, I'm appointed at large, but Jim ought to be able to go and say, as a BESE member of region whatever, I am promoting and I'm for this bill. Not as saying he's representing BESE as a whole, but he's testifying there on behalf of his constituents.
You have a good point, that's what the message I was trying to get across, that it's his right.
But
As
you're
an
saying
individual.
in here, he can't say he's a BESE member.
Can't say, oh, there's not representing or that's not
Well, what is it? I know that you're saying that you're not, but it says here, where's the exact word? It says that individual, I am not representing an official position of BESE, and I am representing myself. Is it myself as a BESE member? Is that appropriate? Because when you're
A
saying,
solution, Dr. Davis, a solution may be just at the end saying, I am not representing an official position of BESE and am representing myself as BESE district representing whatever district. I mean, that might be helpful.
because I just think that it's important for elected officials to be able to say that they are representing the concerns of their constituents, or their beliefs as a BESE member. And I totally agree with it, not as a BESE board, but that implies to me that Ronnie's just there as a regular old citizen, but he's not. He's there as part of his role as a BESE member.
Yeah, they're gonna look at that, Dr. Davis, very good point.
Also, a couple of, y'all are gonna get a watch list of all the bills at a vesting member, and if there's a proposed position, you will have that in front of you at a meeting and you can discuss it. The session starts April 12th, so that won't be until the April meeting because the deadline is not.
All right, we have two on deck. Ethan, you have privilege, you raised your hand?
Oh, I was just gonna say, that was the intent behind that statement, was that as a vesting member, not as themselves. That was the intent behind that. We just needed to have clarification between the official position of vesting and a vesting member falling on their own against the will of the whole. That's all.
Dr. Davis, we can add that language that I think will satisfy your need there.
Statement, Representative Garafilo?
Let me give you, first off, Dr. Davis, on your issue, I don't think there's a chairman in the House that won't let me testify as a member of BESE, as long as, you're going to get the question. I'm going to ask you, are you testifying with an official position from BESE, or are you testifying on your own? That's the way it'll be presented to you. I don't know that BESE can prevent you from doing that. I would say they can't. So absolutely, anytime, if you have an issue that's important to you and you want to come and testify, please come and see us. To Preston's issue, I would say that if an individual member has an important issue that you want to get across, and you're not getting support from the department because they don't believe it's the right thing to do, you can find your own legislator to bring that issue. You come to me, and if it's something that I'm not interested in, you go to somebody else, you might find somebody that's interested, that thinks it's a good idea, and then you take everybody else out of the issue. So that's always, and you guys are elected from different parts of the state, you have a very vast experience basis, so you're going to get legislators that are going to listen to you, certainly I am. May not always agree with you, but you'll find somebody to carry that bill if you want it. I don't want to get into BESE's business, but certainly if there's an issue that's really important to you that BESE agrees on, if BESE passes a resolution that says this is an issue that we believe is very important, we get that from local government all the time. Local government, St. Clair Parish Council will pass a resolution, send it to me and say, we believe X, Y, or Z. So BESE can certainly pass a resolution that says, we, the members of BESE, believe that this is very important to the state of Louisiana, and we're supporting this piece of legislation. It goes a long way with a lot of members. Let me not paint with a broad brush, but there are some members that sometimes that's all they listen to. So that's something that I think a tool in your toolbox that you guys should be aware of. Again, we get that from different government bodies all the time. So I think that's something that you guys should consider as a board and even as individual members. to Dr. Brumley and Dr. Leger's points, I always recommend to my members when they're bringing a piece of legislation, or even if they're not on a committee, go talk to the department, go talk to individual BESE members, see what they think about this bill before you bring it before the committee. Because I'm going to call and I'm going to ask them. And I've told Dr. Brown, I've told Dr. Leger, and I've told Chairman Holloway, President Holloway, that we expect you guys to tell us if there's something that's detrimental to the state or something that you believe is going to move the state forward. I need that input. I understand legally the department's not supposed to put in a white, they're supposed to put in a white card, not supposed to take a position, but certainly BESE can, individual BESE members can. And I've encouraged Dr. Brumley, Dr. Leger, and certainly now Ethan. And Ethan and I have a long relationship with Pelican Policy Institute, and I believe I can trust him, and he's going to give me the true position of what's going on with that bill and how it's going to affect the students, bottom line, we're all mostly concerned with. So I need that input, because I'm not familiar with every issue. My members aren't familiar with every issue. You guys are going to be more familiar with those issues. So the more input we receive, the better we can make an informed decision. So that's the main points that I want to make right now. Certainly, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to address them.
One second, Mr. Castillo. Thank you for those comments. You're right on target, and I do want Shane in a moment to address the resolution. And also, I encourage all members to reach out to legislators like I have. And Ray and I have spoken, like, call us, talk to us. We want to know, we want to help. And I encourage you to do that with legislators. Reach out to them and encourage them to reach back out to you if they're not quite sure. Send them to Shane or send them to another member that may know more information. But this is what it's all about, building that relationship, moving forward, and making a greater impact on our students. Ray, do you have anything else?
No, I was going to take questions.
Yes, Mr. Castillo, go right ahead.
I'm not so sure it's as much of a question as a comment, but I greatly appreciate the clarification. It certainly helps me individually as a board member. But I sort of take the position that we're BESE and that we should be weighing in, not just on policy, but what education law might look like. And we should be offering our opinion and offering ideas as it relates to legislation. And would like for us to take a more proactive role in that regard. So this is helpful. And then I guess I asked internally from a timing standpoint, so this is great. We're meeting in February. That gives us time to work with team to team to flesh something out. And I'm just wondering if, even going forward, that we have at this point in time where we should really be digging in, thinking about what sort of recommendations as we lead up to maybe a February meeting that we can offer recommendations, suggestions. Obviously, the legislature can do whatever it wants to in its wisdom, but at least being able to continue to advance where perhaps the department can't, given the limitations on its roles. But maybe to your point, Lawrence, leading up to that, because that requires some preparation. Do we have a list of topics that we are addressing as it relates to policy that probably needs the teeth of law that we're looking at in November, December, January? When we get to February, we've got kind of a hot topics of these things really need legislation. We can only go so far from a policy perspective. And just maybe adding some structure to that so that we are in the best possible position, so we're not individually just running off, so that we can prepare resolutions. And then when we can't agree by resolution, by individual board member, feel free to reach out as the chairman has recommended, so that we can advance something that might be different than what's in the resolution. So that offers a lot of clarity for me, Mr. Chairman, so thank you for those comments.
May I respond real quick?
Yes, you may.
I would say it's never too early, Dr. Steele, because we find as legislators is we're being pulled on all the time, 20 different directions a day. So the earlier you engage with a legislator, the better chance you have of taking one of the bills that he has or giving his ear and making him understand, him or her understand what the issue is you're trying to address. So it may be too late for this session, but it's not too late for next session. You know, one thing's for sure, well, I guess in COVID, you should never say one thing's for sure, but generally, we're gonna have another session. There's always gonna be another chance for you to address that issue. So I would say it's never too early. You know, there'll be cutoff dates in any particular year, but that's my best comment to you right now is if you have an idea, start with it, because you may not be able to get it that year, but the next year is always a possibility.
That then does raise the question again, should we have some sort of guidepost of saying, look, we've had some this past year, for example, that we wanted to make policy, but then we understood that, well, we need really legislation, law to accomplish some of the things that we've been trying to accomplish on a number of different fronts. That, to your point, that maybe we start marking and saying, with your guidance, for example, you got some things here, and if you guys think that you might want this to be law, I need you to be aware of the timing.
Mr. Castillo, yes, Dr. Bromley will add to that, so
Okay.
you can hopefully give you an answer to your questions again.
Okay.
So two things. One, if you have particular legislation for this session, I'm not of the belief that it's absolutely too late yet, because we're still working with a few legislators. But like the chairman said, we're right up on that timeline. So let me know as soon as possible if you have something that we can support you with for this particular session. But the chairman's absolutely right. The other thing is we can work through this process, and we can add some dates in for which BESE could have a process to signal to the department areas of interest or potential legislation in advance of the session for next year.
Thank you. I encourage board members to attend the committee hearings. And Shana, I ask that you inform the board members of when the committees meet, when Chairman Garofalo's committee meets. I encourage you to attend these meetings. I'm going to tell you, I've learned so much from Chairman Garofalo and how he operates at the table, along with his committee members. They're so professional, and it's just giving me a lot of insight and the knowledge of. And I encourage you, at any moment, you can attend, whether it's his committee or Senate Ed. It's so beneficial, and you can see the tie-in of how these bills come forward, or the conversation is taking place, and quite intriguing. Yes, Dr. Davis.
So I have a question about the change from DOE taking only white card positions as opposed to putting in green card or red cards, because I've been at the legislature a lot over the past decade, and former Superintendent White and Aaron Bindley, his policy director or whatever her title was, they turned in blue or red and green and white cards on a regular basis. And so I guess my question is, what's the rationale behind this change? Because as I look at the process that you have described, Mr. Leger, about circulating among departments, gathering concerns and improvements, and then allowing, contacting Bill's authors to basically voice your concerns about issues. And there's even at one point, if the legislative or if the leaders of BESE make a change or an amendment, a proposed amendment to a piece of legislation, that we're supposed to okay that decision with the department. And so what it sounds like is, we really are taking, DOE is taking positions on bills. They're just not doing it at committee hearings. And so I guess from a transparency perspective and trying to figure out kind of what DOE is lobbying for and behind the scenes, I guess I don't understand if we're invested enough in the education bills that are going through the legislature to seek to change what they're doing so they are amenable and in best alignment with what's best for the children of Louisiana, why the department won't say whether they oppose or support a bill.
Yeah, I'll respond to that briefly, and just say that we believe, under the advice of legal counsel, and I wish that Joan was able to be here, but she is unable to be here today, that we, under advice of legal counsel, it is appropriate for us to place a white card instead of a red or green card. Our communication with members, legislators, will be information only about what the bill actually would prompt to happen in the educational space. Now, the difference, I think, is, so Dr. Leger mentioned a particular theme that we're having to do around fingerprinting and all of this, and so that's not necessarily, that is something that we have to do to comply with a different law, like maybe a federal law, that just, we have to make sure that our laws here in Louisiana are in compliance with that. So I think that's a little different, but, you know, our goal is to follow legal counsel on this issue, and not talk about what has previously happened, but to be aligned with that as we move forward.
Okay, we can add to
Did our legal counsel change between your, assuming this?
Previously, the board designated Aaron, and you can do that, there's even a form for the board to designate someone to speak on their behalf. And that was how that happened. And Aaron would fill out a card, and she would put representing BESE, not representing the department, because she had been designated through our legislative process. It was approved by the board to speak at certain times. So it was possible. It was not illegal for her to do.
Okay, and so I don't see that as like part of our white page here. So does that mean that when BESE has a position in this legislative session, that it's going to be someone from the leadership team that goes to voice BESE's position? Is our leadership team going to, if they can't make it, appoint another BESE
absolutely,
member?
yes, and that was the next, yes, I can designate someone, and more than likely that will happen. Let's just go back to Ronnie with technology. If it was something about technology that we felt very strongly on, and that he is really the lead person, I'd say, Ronnie, can you go in and speak on behalf of the support, or it could be against of whatever may happen? Absolutely.
So the plan is for you all to approve a process, maybe in March, and part of that would be designating the leadership to take positions, and then also designate other members in the process to go and speak.
Kind of follow the logic of that analysis, and that is, if that's the case, that we can designate a person to speak on our behalf, and Aaron Bindley was a person that was so designated, could we then designate the superintendent to speak on our behalf and take a position? Could you follow that same sort of logic?
I don't think that that's the route that our administration would prefer to go. We would prefer to provide information and give the position of BESE leadership as a fact at that table.
Okay, I understand the distinction. I want to switch topics, but I don't want to switch before. It's along the same lines, but it's not specifically germane to the process. So my next question is, because we're so close to the chairman's point, I suspect that there's a lot of interest around testing and the consequences of testing. And I suspect that legislators are going to be pulled in lots of different directions about assessments, and because it's February and the legislature is about to meet, are we taking a position, offering any guidance? Because we may find ourselves simply reacting to legislation around these topics. Do we want to do something that's more proactive as opposed to simply reacting? Maybe that's been covered, but I just.
This might help, Preston, I'll ask Shane to talk about the resolution and maybe something that could help with this. As a,
What gets hairy is that our meetings are not always coinciding with when things are changing. But we could, if you know, if a bill has been drafted and you all know you want to see important. You could formally make a list of bills and resolutions, as Representative Garfield has stated. We could do resolutions as a formal process at a meeting for those bills that you want to support or those ideas that you want to.
So mine is a little bit, thank you, it's a little more specific, and that is, I don't know what bills that may be coming down the pipeline. We talk gingerly around testing, the consequences of testing, and all of that, but we sort of haven't really gotten into it because we thought we needed to wait for, let's see what happens. But I'm afraid, or I believe, that there will be lots of weighing in at the legislature, and I'm looking for the chair to nod, and he's nodding, that that's going to happen. But it may be happening without the benefit of BESE, the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, saying anything about it in advance. So to the point of resolutions, it's sort of, if we have a position, given that we're BESE, probably now is the time for us to take that up and offer it. Otherwise, we won't meet back in time to give any sort of meaningful input into that discussion. If we want our opinions to be heard in some way.
Oh, if you want to say one thing, I haven't had a chance to tell you this, but I was going back and researching, we used to have a legislative committee of the board. We used to have like 10 committees. But we did call a meeting of that committee on all board meeting dates in order to discuss the thing. I'm not saying that's something you want to do, but we could call special call meetings or have other meetings if something came up that was very important for us to weigh in on as a board. So I just want to throw that out there.
Well, I will say that that's probably a really critical issue that everybody is thinking about, talking about constituents and everybody else's constituents. They're talking about it, and I'm offering an opinion, but it's mine as a District 8 BESE member, but then folks are saying, well, what's the department, what's BESE's position? And again, I raise it now, I know that it is a fluid issue, but because the legislature is likely about to take it up, should we not be weighing in on it and maybe having such a special meeting?
Well, you could offer that as an item for our March agenda.
I offer it as an item for our March agenda.
I'll give you a motion.
You don't need a motion, you can just add it.
Yeah.
Can you just phrase it so I have a better understanding?
That I asked an item for consideration with regard to testing and assessments to be, as it relates to a legislative position around that particular topic. I can rephrase it, but I think you get the gist.
If we have a testing item coming, we can think about that discussion.
And will that give us enough time for sponsorship or?
Well, you haven't requested deadline March 31st, if there's anything pre-filing.
But it's March 31st, and is that enough time, Mr. Chairman?
We start on April 12th.
Good, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Castor, I appreciate that. Yes, Mr. Morris.
There's a lot of really good discussion about the process and positioning and decision-making process and so forth. I really appreciate the dialogue. But I wanted to see if we could nail it down with regard to who can take a position or not. Can we get clarification on who cannot take positions? And that was the simplest question, and everybody else can. So can we get clarification on who cannot take a position?
We're talking about BESE members? Who cannot, which BESE members?
In general, who cannot take a position either by law or policy or whatever. Simply that would simplify the conversation so that if everybody cannot take a position, everybody else can. So just want to get clarification on that one. We got
Boards and commissions.
Yeah.
Boards and commissions. But boards and commissions. And positions, but employees and agencies cannot.
Maybe that should be refined, because we're a board, and so we certainly can take a position, articulated that. So, but the only entity that cannot take a position, from what I heard, is the Department of Education not formally.
Okay, let's Roland.
Yeah,
You want
I
to
think that's
clarify
accurate. We're going to give information under white card, and part of that information will be the direction from leadership that they have signaled to us is leadership's position on the item. I think what we have spelled out here for you as a potential process is that if there's someone designated that's going to speak in terms of that leadership position, okay, but if you as an individual member are in opposition of that, you would say, I am representing district so-and-so, not the entire board in this position.
What I heard Mr. Castile say was that the department could not take a position. Okay, so if that's the case, fact, then the example, the previous example that was given was Aaron Bentley was testifying. So my question would be, if she were someone in her capacity, we're going to testify again, and someone asked, who is she testifying on behalf of? Could she say anything but the department?
The reason why if the board formally approved a motion to
I'm
have.
really just trying to get it real simple, I'm just looking for a yes or no answer. If somebody's going to testify, then if the question is posed, who are you representing? Could that response be anything or anybody other than the department?
If the board designated the department formally as a board, like they did for Aaron, they made a motion to designate Aaron to speak on the board's behalf. Well, it was, okay, yes, the board to designate someone to speak.
My question is still the same. If somebody's going to testify, somebody asks the question, who are you testifying on behalf? Could the answer be anything but the department? If the individual says the department, then that's not allowed. So my question is everything else allowed?
I'm asking if you're at the table and you're asked, who are you testifying for? On behalf of. It's going to be either Ronnie Morris independently, or I'm representing BESE by designation of. Would that answer it? Yes.
I think what Ms. Morris is asking, maybe using the superintendent was a bad reference because it puts in an awkward position. But Mr. Leger is in a position equivalent to Aaron Bentley. I think your question is, could Mr. Leger be appointed by us as a designee, or designated rather, to speak and put in an actual card, not just when he gets to the table and respond, but put in a card, green or red, and say, this is the position of BESE, and actually advocate for that position. Is that your question, Mr. Mark?
Yes, sir. So that would be an answer other than the department.
And the answer,
He's an employee of the department, but he's speaking on behalf of BESE.
and because we know that BESE has that authority, because it did so as it relates to Mr. Bentley, we therefore have the authority to designate, if we so choose to do so, designate Mr. Leger to do that. We may not want to do that as a matter of policy, but it sounds like we have the authority, and from a policy standpoint, the superintendent might say, I'm not sure we want to do it, but it sounds like we have the authority to do so.
Thank you for your help.
Yeah, referring back to Dr. Rowley's comment about legal counsel. It's under our understanding that as a government employee, that we cannot lobby for or against a bill. So when we go to the table, we'll be representing the department in terms of providing data, information, facts, concerns or issues, as well as maybe questions for legislators to ponder so that they may be as informed as possible to make the best interest of a decision in the best interest of children.
So even though BESE asked yourself, as an example, to represent Bessie, the department goes to decline.
Again, we would defer to legal counsel, and I don't look at myself, but our understanding from legal counsel is that we, as employees, cannot take a public stance in support or opposition of the bill.
I'm good, thank you for the clarification.
Thanks.
Yeah, second question, trying to get some questions on this side of the table. Let's see, the pages on the number here, so page 2 of the 2021 legislative session proposed process, there's a reference to matrix questions for decision making. I thought there's some really good questions here. I didn't actually see a matrix. I was wondering, is there a matrix associated with this decision making process?
Are you referring to the name of, I think that is it, watch list? No, the matrix question.
Yeah, I think on the matrix, maybe matrix isn't the best word. These are more, things one might want to consider arriving at a decision. It's not a scorecard, so maybe we should look at that language.
Okay, just to make sure the decision making process is clear and I understand that. Thank you.
Yes, Dr.
I have a question about the tracking process and decisions that either Bessie or the leadership team is going to make regarding positions on bills. So I think at the beginning it said there's going to be a watch list of bills that concern education from early childhood all the way to high school. Is there a process by which we're going to be, all sent a list of these bills, and then if the Bessie board as a whole wants the entire board to debate a position rather than just the leadership team, is there a process by which that's going to happen?
Or are you talking at a board meeting?
Well, like at the board meeting, so say in March, if we're going through this and we have, or even in April, we've looked and bills have been filed and we're able to read them and there is a tracking list, right? And we get a note from you as a leadership member saying, leadership is going to support this bill, but there is enough of kind of a concern about whether or not that's the right thing to do. What's the process by which bills are going to be debated by the entire board, or at least discussed by the entire board? So let's say, for instance, there's the bill, the hypothetical bill that Mr. Castillo brought up regarding accountability. And so let's say that this bill said we don't want to give school letter grades to schools or districts this year. So still take the lead, but don't give them an accountability score. I suspect that there's a wide variety of opinions about whether or not that might be a good idea on this board. So what is the process by which we have the ability as a board to weigh in on that outside of just the legislative or just the leadership team?
Yeah, I think we mentioned it earlier, when we talked about having his item on the agenda for this March.
That's right. Okay, but what if there are others as the
Any.
So it's going to be a broad-based, any piece of legislation that we've seen filed, not just relating to a special meeting?
You want to call a special meeting?
Yeah.
To have that. Jim, did you have any experience? Because
I thought it said in here somewhere that the department was going to have an agenda item on our upcoming Bessie meeting regarding legislative bills that had been proposed up to that date of that meeting. And during that committee hearing, any Bessie member can make a motion saying, it says here that leadership is planning to favor this. I would like to pull that for discussion because I'm not sure that's the position we should take. And so it gets pulled for discussion, and during that discussion, any Bessie member can make the motion, if they get a second, to change the position that Bessie leadership has said, this is what I think Bessie would want to have done, and then discuss that and maybe vote to change the position.
So I guess I'm just, part of my concern is like, I know how fast the legislative process can work, and so I guess I'm trying to think about what's the process by which members, as bills move through the process, if the leadership team has taken a position on something, and we don't have time before it heads to House Ed or Senate Ed, I guess at that point, it's just a case of where individual board members have to go and testify as individual BESE members in opposition to the leadership team, which is kind of a bad dynamic, but,
And that's been a problem
Yeah.
every year for forever, I would say. And you do have to place, BESE as a whole has to place some trust in the leadership team to not just be representing what that team thinks ought to happen, but what that team thinks BESE as a whole thinks should happen. Because at any time, as Jan mentioned, at any time during the legislative process, any 6 members of BESE, if they see the leadership team taking a wrong direction, can force a special called meeting to happen. And within, 24 hours after they notify the president that 6 members are calling a meeting, that meeting can be forced to happen. So the membership, so the leadership team really is trying to do what BESE wants as a whole, or 6 votes of BESE would want to have happen.
so I appreciate the patience with my question, just as a new member, this is, really, I want to make sure that I know
Yeah,
exactly
very
how
good
this
thought.
process.
Also with these calls that we'll have with leadership, I've asked Jim to join us with his expertise and to guide us in those decisions too. So know that, and plus on Fridays, that will be delivered to the group. So anytime there's some gap, some glitch, we need to know, because we are working really hard trying to maneuver through this. It's a terrain that is very technical, yes.
I would add a caveat, and I'm sure that Chairman Biafalo can attest that, that any given time during the hearing of a bill, one amendment can completely change the complexion of the bill. And so, in terms of efficiency, if we're there under this situation where BESE leadership has said, given to us in written format that we support or oppose the bill as is, during that process, during that hearing, if there's an amendment that's going to shift the bill significantly, I need to be able to contact President Holloway immediately and let her know this amendment has taken place, or are we still in the same position, or are we moving to a different position, so that we can be as fluid and as efficient as possible.
Yes, I'm sorry, Ms. Roger, you had your hand up.
I think one of the things that Jim mentioned is going to help significantly. If on the March meeting, you get the list of the pre-filed legislation to them with the recommended position, support, opposed, or the position of it, and the ability of members to pull out a bill that may have a difference of opinion with the further discussion. At least through that meeting, we will have an official BESE position. And to Keith's point, and for those of us, I think many of us, have been through that, those committee meetings and legislative process over the years, it's absolutely right. I mean, that thing can change every 10 minutes. Once this amendment is offered, somebody does this, somebody does that. So the need for a quick decision at some point is paramount. But we're going to have to, at some point, trust somebody to be able to make a quick decision, and that somebody is going to have to be our leadership, our officers at that point. If there is time to get further input from everyone, that's fine. But on those split decision times, we have to be able to trust that leadership. And if we can, in March, to that point, feel comfortable with positions on anything that has been filed up until then, I think that's going to be the majority of the, pre-filed legislation. And also, if there's something major that comes in the interim, and 6 people wish to call a special meeting or something, then we get the ability to separate that.
Yes, thank you. Before John, Dr. Garland was answering.
Just to Dr. Biggs and Mr. Garvey's point, and then Ms. O'Shea as well, this is why we have on this list that in the last items as public meetings, March, April, and June, we're going to be bringing these items, these bills to the full board, so that everyone can hear about them, learn about them, and as Jim said, weigh in on all of these particular items. And so, in addition to that, that's why we're going to be making our office available on Friday mornings as well to have these calls. So we have it weekly, but you'll also have it these during these formal meetings. You know, we as the agency, we're trying to do our best with this to support BESE as a board. You know, we are public employees working to support an appointed and elected board. And so that's why there are some lines here that we're trying to have drawn that are distinctly different. But we think that all of this certainly gives everyone the opportunity to hear about all the bills, learn about them, weigh in. But, you know, Superintendent Bochet's point is spot on. At some point, there has to be a trusted leadership too to make some decisions and make some calls. And like Mr. Garvey said, there needs to be a change in those positions or whatever. That's where you call meetings or weigh in during this particular time.
Thank you. Mr. Garvey?
Yeah, when we had talked about this issue a week or so ago, some issue came up about whether if an officer is not, or designated member is not at a committee hearing, can a red card or green card be put into the record on behalf of BESE?
Yes.
Particularly considering that, you know, the back of the card says, I'm taking this position and I'm here to testify. There would be no one there to testify in that, or no BESE member there to testify. Have you all had a chance to talk to the committee chairman or the staff of the committees to see if there's a way to work around that?
We are going to follow up with both Chairman Garofalo and Senator Fields, but we feel confident that relationship, they want to know BESE's position on this thing.
Absolutely.
Clearly he can speak to this, but he has shared with me numerous times that he wants to know the position of his board whenever they consider items.
I can go, I mean, I just can't go to all the meetings, you know, obviously there's a lot of meetings. I could definitely go in and put the card.
She could be, or someone else could be designated. Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, first of all, just wanted to commend Chairman Garofalo based on Dr. Davis's comments about how fast the legislature works.
Or slow, depending on you.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Yes.
And I was curious if it's possible, given the discussion we had this morning about the work process and so forth, would it be possible to put together a visual aid with a timeline so we understand, you know, what the deadlines are for certain criteria, decision making and so forth?
We will work to update this, that includes the conversation that's been held.
Very good. Thank you so much for this healthy discussion, and hopefully a lot of clarification is given here. Any objections to our conversation, our item here? No objection, so the next item, please.
Next item is consideration of the Louisiana Department of Education Garbage Plan for 2021. Motion to receive.
Motion, Mr. Castillo, Mr. Morris, second. And please remember there are snacks on the other side of the room here. Restrooms, please, very important. Yeah, let's try to work through this. If you members don't mind, the department wants to work through it, whatever in minutes, and then we can break actually if need be, time for closure.
We will try to work through this relatively quickly, just because we know the weather condition is further deteriorating and many of you have a long way to travel. So a couple of things. First of all, I am really excited to have released this document a few weeks back, maybe even a month back at this point. And we think it articulates from the agency standpoint those things in which we believe. We're really excited on being able to put those belief statements forward, and arriving at that was not simply a few of us getting together in a room one day and writing out some belief statements. We were very deliberate in a process to get to a point where we were able to articulate these statements. And then we wanted to take the agency goals that had existed for several years, and then just take a look at where we stand on those particular agency goals that had been developed a few years back. And so those are the 6 critical goals. And, we have all had a number of conversations. Certainly you've had the opportunity to ask me questions about all of these goals. We try to paint a picture of where we are, whether it is where we want it to be or not. We try to give a clear picture with the best available data that we presently have on each of these 6 goals that have existed for some time. And so we have all of that information for you. We've been able to share this information with stakeholders throughout the state so that our state as a whole knows where we are. And in fact, I believe that as a result of doing this, I think that's why we have a lot of energy and movement around literacy right now in our state, and the need to be able to approach this maybe with a renewal, with a revival, so that we can all work together to find better ways to make sure that our kids are on track, specifically on track by the end of 3rd grade. And then at the end, we were able to list out priorities, and under each of those priorities, focus areas. And so our assistant superintendents and chief of staff are all in the room today. They have worked with their teams to not only call out these particular areas where our agency intends to work over the next few years, but we are in the process of building out, structured plans on what's happening, when's it happening, who is doing these things, how are they doing it, where are they doing it, when are they doing it, how are we progress monitoring. In my previous experiences serving as superintendent in 2 different systems, this is very similar to the approach that I use to try and move work. And so that is the approach that we are also taking here. Really excited about the number of superintendents and system leaders throughout the state who have also taken a really deep interest in their data, but also these particular focus areas. I don't want to say I'm surprised by that, because so many people in our state want to see, want to do better, want us to be stronger, and are looking for ways in which to do that and support to be able to do those things. And so have been really excited about the levels of collaboration that we have seen throughout the state around a number of these particular items. One of the things we also heard from system leaders, once we published the state data on these 6 critical goals, and it's a natural question, many system leaders said, hey, what does my data look like? What does it look like in X system or X parish? And so we were able to, our data teams, we were able to run that information and be able to give each individual system their own individual data on the 6 agency goals. And frankly, I think that's good, because if we're all trying to accomplish the same things collectively, I think we have a much greater chance of actually doing those things. And I did include in your, I did not, but our team included in your folder information on the individual school systems and where they stand on these particular goal areas, so that you have that information. We have encouraged specifically places where there is a new system leader or systems that feel like they need to rework the strategic plan, or they're interested in reworking the strategic plan, to utilize this as a process. And we are also trying to work to support them in doing that. And so we have quite a few systems, in fact, who are going to be using this information to help craft their own first strategic plan or a new strategic plan for their system. So we're really excited about that. We think that has a ton of potential if we're all working in those same particular areas and guided by the priorities that we've set out as an agency. So you have that information. I also point out within your folder, you should also have a synopsis of funding, and by funding I'm referring to the funding from March on the CARES dollars. You should have that, but you should also have information on funding for the December allocation from the federal government and the allocations, estimated allocations for systems that we will be pushing out in the future. So you have all of that information there in front of you as well. And so at this point, instead of, going bullet by bullet through this entire plan, we have done this already. And you have certainly read that. I just want to take some time to entertain any questions or any suggestions about anything relevant to our plan or anything that you think we should be considering. And I have our assistant superintendents here in the room, and they can probably, or they are prepared to have any discussions that you would like to have around each of their particular areas of budget. So I'll just pause here and see what questions we have in the room, and ask that Assistant Suits, if an area of interest that's under your watch comes up, that you just step up and help us work through those issues.
Dr. Bowman had a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
Just want to make sure I have the right interpretation here for the handout. There are 3 critical goals that are listed. You have the goals, data, sheet for each individual district. And they're listed as critical goal number 1, critical goal number 2, critical goal number 3. The department has identified 6 critical goals. So you understand are these really the highest priority of the 6?
They run on multiple pages because.
You have a second sheet behind the paper level.
So you have 1, 2, and 3, and then you have 4, 5, and 6. You can only print so much on that page, and you'd be able to, us be able to see it.
Thank you, Superintendent, okay for that. Next question. So I really appreciate the data, as you have it broken down, specific to District 6. I'm curious if we could get the pace setters for each of the 6 individual goals, which districts in the state are far above everybody else, to give us an appreciation for what they're doing right now and how we potentially share those learnings. So our request is we could identify the pace setters at the top 3 in the state for each of the 6 individual goals.
Yeah, happy to do that. I think that's more complicated than probably just who has the highest number, because there are individual circumstances within districts and challenges that systems have to overcome that might also play into that. So what we'll try to do is we can pull those top 3 for you in all those areas, but if there are other places that really stand out and we know if there are challenges that they're overcoming, we'll try to highlight that as well.
And then for each of the 6 goals, in addition to that, as you said, we've also identified the federal funding that's being passed through now. And so I guess the inference here is that as that funding is passed through the districts, identifying these 6 critical goals should provide the local school districts with some indication for opportunities for allocating that funding. So I'm wondering, will there be some sort of feedback to the board with regard to successes that we've had, that the districts have had from utilizing that funding specific to these 6 goals?
Yeah, well, I mean, these are things that we intend to continue tracking. In terms of your question about funding, we wanted to go ahead and provide system leaders with an estimate of their second round of funding dollars. It may not be exact, but it's going to be close, we believe. And so we were able to do that last week. And we also followed that up with a listing of priorities of the areas where we think are the greatest leverage points for these dollars, as well as federal guidelines on how the dollars can be used. And we shared that just as a preliminary, as you think about this funding, think about it in these ways that would be helpful. And so we provided that, but that's not all. We are coming back behind that with further guidance, further suggestions and opportunities for how that 90% can be utilized. We recognize that there are nearly 200 systems that operate in their own political subdivisions as well, But at the same time, we're trying to do our best to take an active role in helping individuals and support them thinking through how best to use this as a lever for change. And so more of that will be coming out over the next month. But we also have the additional piece, which is probably an area that needs discussion, what is an area that needs discussion, and we would certainly like feedback from this board, which is that 10%, which is that state set aside, so that we're using that in a way that advances education in the state and isn't just a one-time hit, but in many ways, you know, is a catalyst for doing something or has a long-term benefit. So certainly want to hear from members around how we should be thinking as a department structuring those funds.
Thank you for that. So I guess I'm interested in both the 90% and the 10% prize as far as, you know, as the board, a taxpayer, as a grandparent, you know, what kind of return on investment that we're getting, right, from these federal subsidies. And so I'm interested in how we can get some feedback from local districts as far as some sort of stewardship process, you know, what is working, what is not working, how can we identify success and share it with others in the network. And I'm also obviously interested, my question would be, what is the plan, again, is the board going to have a discussion about the other 10%?
Well, I mean, I think that we're open to hear conversations around that at any point. And in fact, many people have already shared items. That's, you know, that's part of today as well. Doris, I see your just hands there, so I'm right now. But, yeah, I mean, I think today's a good time. I mean, if you have anything in particular you want to share with us, or shape our thinking as we think through that, we'd love to hear it.
Okay, I didn't see that as a specific agenda item, so.
Well, I think, and you know, thank you for that. And that we handled it that way intentionally because we felt like we could handle most any question or comment that you would have under these areas. And so, for instance, on priority plan, we have priorities-based pandemic relief funding, management, and support as one of the focus areas. So that is certainly something we have the ability to talk about right now.
Okay, so before we get to that, I want to get some feedback on the concept of some sort of stewardship or feedback mechanism with regard to the 90% of the federal funding allocation. Help us to appreciate where the districts have had some success and also, you know, maybe where things haven't been successful and how we're going to share that learning throughout the state.
Yeah, so, I mean, as you walk through that, what is it that you envision there particularly?
Sure. So one example, right, might be that you've laid out 6 critical goals here, right? The department identifies as high priorities. So if there's no silver bullet for every child, right? Everybody gets that. But if these are 6 critical goals that the department has identified, and there are school districts throughout the state that have invested in one or more of these specific critical goals by various means, then we would be able to track the progress of these critical goals relative to the funds that were spent on towards specific goals.
Yeah, I mean, we could easily continue to track that, and certainly those dollars should have an impact on that. But, you know, I don't think it's just those dollars that impact that, but we can continue to track that.
Yeah, I just appreciate, you know, some feedback with regard to how the funds were invested and where we achieved success. And then also, again, how we're sharing those successes as a network with other districts in the state.
Yeah, well, and one of the things that we have intention to do is under our dashboard that we presently have developed, the priority areas, as a system spends, it would populate their spending in those priority areas. So if you're a member of public, for instance, and look, I get your question because I get it every day, you know, a number of times. And so if you're a member of the public, you know, our you know, idea is that, you know, we have these priorities listed out and, you know, you're able to go in and see X amount of dollars were spent in this particular literacy, for instance. These dollars were spent in those particular areas. And Dr. Timmel's at the table, she's our chief of staff, and she's overseeing this along with CNO. But before you get going, Dr. Timmel, I want to hear from Dora. She's patiently waiting to the motion.
You know me, I'm not quite as patient. When we get these stats, I would like, if possible, what are the indicators with parishes? And by that, I would like to see their socioeconomic status, the economically disadvantaged rate of each school system. Because when we take a look at data and see maybe who's doing a little better here, one of the things you look at, you want to look at some of the outliers. So if you've got a school or a school system with high economically disadvantaged rate for their kids, and they're scoring above, well, maybe they're doing something, but they may not be in the top 3. And then vice versa. If you've got a school system who is scoring relatively high, but with a very low socioeconomic rate in comparison, maybe they're not doing as well as they really could be doing. And of all the indicators, most of the research says that's the primary indicator. More so than, race, ethnicity, and all of that is the economically disadvantaged rate within a community. So I'd like to see that when we see these kinds of spreadsheets.
And Superintendent Boccia, that was, and I saw you nod your head when I said it, so I knew you agree. I mean, that, we can just give the top 3, but that's probably not telling the true story. So there are other, but I don't want to call out various things, but there are other things that we need to consider and highlight as well. So it's a more nuanced highlight probably than just the top 3 numbers. Dr. Tim?
Well,
I'm sorry.
And then, to Bonnie's other point about these monies that are coming down the pipe to the school systems. The 90%, and I think what you said wrongly, in terms of each of these schools and school districts are their own political subdivisions or entities, with the independent power and obligation to their communities to address the issues their communities feel are most important. So with always the goal with improving student achievement, that first round of funding that came out, I think what you're going to see mostly is a lot of it's been on PPE and technology and devices and connectivity, which would be, I think, the major part, along with virtual learning, additional staff for that, to get that set up. The priorities that the state has, or the critical goals, with this funding comes a whole list of allowable expenditures. And those allowable expenditures, it's really quite flexible to a great extent. As I read through them, we can all interpret any phrase in its most liberal way or its most conservative way, depending upon our point of view. However, some of it may not be directly relatable to every priority program, say, that we have, or to that particular goal. It's supposed to be a COVID relief bill. It's supposed to be, what has the pandemic done to increase your expenditures? What do you have to do to move beyond that? And sometimes it's a little bit difficult to tie an expenditure to one of those goals. Now, the great thing is there's no supplement versus supplanting provision in these federal funds. That gives us in districts a much more flexibility. What I'm most concerned about from a BESE perspective too is when we have this 10% on 1.1 billion, that's over $100 million. That's a significant amount of funding. It's not 10 million or something, it's $100 million. So I would like a really robust discussion at some point among the members of this board is how do we feel within the allowable expenditures, we can take $100 million and make an impact statewide on our priorities and what's best for the kids throughout Louisiana, which is going to be a significant movement between now and when these funds expire and have to be spent by September of 2023, this last round. Now, and I'm sure, I know everybody did, that a letter from a group of legislators asking that we take a look, districts take a look at taking some of the monies and take a look at the broadband infrastructure within the state. Could we free up some of those funds? I think we need to take a look at this to see if we're going to participate in any movement like that. I know in my area, it's not a broadband infrastructure problem. In my area, it's a connectivity problem, where we have family, I mean, the infrastructure is there, but I have families that are not connected. You know, and.
Ms. Bojay, those are great thoughts, but would you consider having that as a line item in our next BESE meeting to discuss beforehand?
Well, I think we need to begin those discussions.
So
You know, because that money is going to be, and Dr. Timmel and Dr. Brumley are going to be, hopefully, you know, guiding that discussion in terms of timelines, but priority-wise, what we can and cannot spend on from an allowable expenditure posture. What the biggest priorities they feel we have, what do we feel we have, and come to a consensus on that. So as soon as we can.
Absolutely, where you've opened a great discussion here and have given some food for thought for everyone to think and consider. And Shane has noted that for our next item, so be prepared for that.
Chairman, can I just close out my comment?
Sure.
What I was really trying to get to and all that was, there's been a lot of conversation, particularly yesterday, for those who were able to make the meeting yesterday, about out-of-the-box thinking, and there's some silver lining in the COVID thing. And so what I was trying to get to was, there's a lot of opportunity here in this watershed moment for funding some of those out-of-box ideas. So as we see this divergence, COVID, interested in how that divergence is going to be addressed, and dollars are available for that. So ideally, I'd like to, a year from now or 2 years from now, whatever, I'd like to see and expect, some testimony from local districts where, they use this funding to close that gap. This is the approach they took, and this is the opportunity for them to share with others. So networking is very powerful. I just want to make sure that we all are taking advantage of the watershed moment and the networking to the biggest effect for every district in the state. So I think there's a real opportunity here for everybody. You got the funding in place and the networking. You should see some success and the opportunity to share that with others.
Right. Thank you.
Yes,
I would add that I think so much of that is going to happen through collective effort around shared priorities. And then with our ability as an agency to create opportunities for that networking, which we have been deliberate in trying to do and will continue to do that, including one of our focus areas, which is where we're going to be highlighting models of excellence throughout the state and trying to bring in people to see this and look at it. And so that's something Mr. Foltz and his team are going to be doing beginning in the next few months. We're talking about technology, for instance, and for the record, I don't think the technology bill would be a bad bill, but we're talking about it. Just want to give members a little bit of information around some decision-making that, I had to make. Dr. Kim Hunter-Reid and myself had the opportunity to visit with the governor around his EARS funding for K-12 and higher ed. And as we had conversations, one of the things that matters a lot to us is high-quality internet around the state, not just for K-12, but for higher ed as well, and beyond the educational space. And she, not to speak for her, but I feel confident in saying she feels in many ways like I do that, we're being pushed to solve internet as educators, or solid internet as agencies, and that's not who we are. And so one of the requests, and also multiple agencies chasing around something is just complicated and it's inefficient. So one of the things we asked the governor to do is to consider with his ability, the DEERS funding, to fund the startup of the legislatively authorized broadband office, and for that startup to occur. And so he acknowledged that he was willing to do that, had further conversations with the commissioner beyond that. And I need to go ahead and get this out here so that you're aware once it does come to you, that it might be a commitment over not just 1 year, but 3 years. Because our need in terms of internet is not going to be solved within a year. And so, I did share with him that from a principal standpoint, whether it's an additional 500,000, whether it's an additional $1 million of our 100 million, in terms of supporting that office so that they're able to support systems. So if the system says, hey, I want to invest $2 million in infrastructure, how do I do that? They have somebody to call, they have an office to call. So I shared with their office that as needed, if it's 500,000, if it's $1 million of our, 10% set aside, I would be coming to this body to request your approval to continue to support that for a year or two. So I also shared with him that, look, I don't have the ability to make that decision, but I can give you my word that if it's 500,000, it's $1 million to support this office, I will take that to this board over the next year or so. So just so you have that information, you're not surprised by that.
Okay, it's Dr. Tom.
So Ronnie's question around public accountability and how we'll be able to communicate and share how the funding was used, and then also have conversations around who's, implementing some of the best practices. One of the things that we are doing very intentionally with the formula allocations is when systems have to fill out like the EGMS budget, up front, we're asking them to align to priorities, to align some of the funding that they will actually allocate to the focus areas by which you see them the lead to achieve. And so with that, and the dashboard that Dr. Brumman mentioned, we'll have that information readily available. Systems will have to think about it ahead of time, and then we'll have access to that information to populate the dashboard, but to also look for those areas of best practice and be able to reach out to systems and look at how well they're not only spending the money, but then what are the effects and the impacts of that money. So we're being very intentional on the front end so that we can get the kind of information that we believe will be beneficial to you all, but also to the public.
Thank you for that, Dr. Tom. Have you guys brought in any particular frequency of updates that you would provide the board with?
I missed a part of your ask again. I missed the beginning.
I'm sorry. Have you given any consideration to what frequency you would update the board with that information?
We have not, but I'm sure that through the Administration and Finance Committee that we can make that happen via the agenda and be able to provide those updates.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Dr.
I have a question about the special school districts at the LEA funding level. They get to receive any ESSER 1 or ESSER 2 funding, and so I guess I'm curious about why that is. How does that work? I'm sure it's some technical reason. And is Thrive Academy not a special school district? They have a name I didn't know about other than Thrive. Like, are they Opportunities Academy or something? I thought, didn't legislation pass that makes it a special district?
Yeah, so Dr. Davis, if you look like on the first page 1 of the big document, there's a special schools footnote there, which indicates that those schools that are seen as our special schools, that they do not receive via federal allocation, Title I dollars. So they don't have like Title I allocated to them, so that's why you didn't see year allocation or ESSER 1. However, those school systems did, or those special school systems did reach out to that and to administration, and because we had the set aside funds available, we made funds available based on their needs, and we will do the same thing with the ESSER allocation.
And so is Thrive missing from there, or is Thrive had another name when it was created as a special school district?
Then I am not sure about Thrive.
It's not a special school, it's just a school that has been designated to receive a line item in the legislative budget, but it's not considered a BESE special school.
If you look at this, they get an allocation.
They're somewhere in the list, just not under special schools. Thank you, I appreciate that.
Dr. Davis, the listing on the last page, I don't know if you saw this, you may have seen this, but it does share out these special schools and what we were able to provide some level of funding through the incentive since they did receive.
Right, and I appreciate you guys looking out for those schools, that's really important, so thank you.
Any other questions?
I had another question. I'm not sure if we're on topic or not. My question was with regard to the educational priorities handout. Okay. I'm concerned, I agree before, I'm not sure where we're at on page 5. I'm concerned about the teacher retention percentage and, I'd like to get some appreciation for what if any lack, some quantifiable appreciation for what if any lack of teachers we have in the state of Louisiana.
I appreciated you bringing that up. A few weeks back, for everyone in the room, Mr. Morris has asked about, and correct me if I'm misspeaking, Mr. Morris, but on page 5, we have all exiting teachers, and so it gives a number of 5,700. And then the natural question that he's asking is, well, if that means you're leaving, how many are coming in? And so what he wants to know, I believe, is what's the gap? So like if you have 5,700 that are leaving and only 5,000 coming in, then you have a gap of 700. And so we took that back and we tried to figure, we worked on that for some time to come up with a way to display that here. And it's really not that easy because the problem is there's really not a gap in terms of number of teachers that exit versus number of teachers that come in. The problem is on the other side, which is here, which is what they are doing. So for instance, the gap is, say for instance, science, you see science. 24% of science teachers in our state are either uncertified or teaching out of the field. And if you look right below that, you see only 7% of program completers are in science. And so that is where the gap is. So if you look at 1-to-1, it's kind of all even because classes are covered with someone. But the gap then becomes here in the areas where we need them the most.
So we have no teachers, we just don't have no science teachers.
Or math is an area where we have.
That was just an example, but that's the concept you're trying to.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Loche, you have someone?
Well, if I may speak, you have maybe the same number of bodies coming in that are exiting, but all of those bodies are not certified. We have people coming in, temporary authorities are working toward just who have had absolutely no training in how to be a teacher. And they're coming in, so you're putting a body in the classroom. And these are not just the number of teachers that are uncertified, it's the number of classes being taught by those people. So one person could affect 5 classes of kids, 6 classes of kids, or whatever. So you have to put a body in front of a group, but that doesn't make them a certified teacher. I'm assuming, I don't see on this sheet, I know on another sheet I have the number of exiting and then the number of entering. The sheet doesn't have that. And the numbers were about the same.
They're the same, but then when we presented that, we thought, well, that doesn't even signal that there's an issue.
Right.
And we know there's an issue. So ultimately, we decided just to leave that off because, you know, the general public looks at that and they say, all right, that many extras, that many came in, there's no issue. But the issue is over here. This is where there's the issue.
And so while we may put, when you look at, for example, critical goal number 3, which for the mastery at the 8th grade level, yellow and that, and you see a tremendous dip from that critical goal 2 from 3rd grade statewide to 8th grade in math. Well, at the middle school level, at the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade level, we've got people teaching math who are not certified in math, who have not necessarily shown that they are the most proficient people to do it. We're having to help teach them content as well as teaching strategies. Because we are not producing as a state the number of people really truly qualified to walk into those math and science classrooms. And you're seeing those gaps, not necessarily at the elementary level, but you're seeing that problem at the middle and high school level. So those numbers, those percentages of mastery are dipping, and it's a statewide issue. It's not an individual district issue. Then if you have districts maybe that are doing a little bit better, a lot of them are paying more money, so they're getting the most qualified teachers, or they're in a certain area, whatever the reasons, people may migrate to a certain system. So when you look at that critical goal of mastery, and you couple that with this data, then you begin to see where that real problem exists. So how do we address that from the state? How do we address that? How do we attract math and science people at the middle and high school level, people to become teachers?
So Superintendent Boucher is obviously connected dots here. And so my question to Superintendent Romley is, you know, what is the state that would help us to close that gap? You know, as we identify, you know, how we can connect these dots now. Well, between the numbers in critical goal 3 and the, basically the teacher qualification basis of these critical areas.
Well, I want to address the literacy piece as a part of this too, because we are probably 6 to 8 weeks out from releasing a statewide literacy plan. And it's going to be fairly comprehensive, and it's going to be fairly explicit. And there are a number of components of that I'll talk about now, but one of those being we have to make sure that pre-service teachers get additional training or refocused training in phonemic awareness and phonics, so that they're coming into the schools with the ability to match what they know versus what we're asking them to do and to teach. And then we also have to support present teachers in those teams as well. So things are happening around that. I bet Ms. Ellis is going to weigh in on this, but whenever, one of the strangest things in this whole document, probably for someone who doesn't deal in education every day, is if you look at math, what happens between 3rd grade and 8th grade? Like, what is that about? And so, you know, we have a lot of discussion around that. I think there are a number of things that cause that, but for us, we believe it's probably more than anything. You're looking at a certification area that spans so many grade levels of people who are teaching that, and it's about content knowledge. And we have to make sure that we're doing everything that we can, and we're developing the content, math content knowledge for teachers who are teaching those middle grade bands in math. And so we've got to do a better job with that. And so, you know, that's on our radar. The issues around these numbers in terms of reading is also on our radar. We also have quality ratings coming out concerning our universities, and we think that there's probably a way to weave in formally literacy instruction in what we're asking universities to do and how we're, have some level of illumination on their results. And so there are a number of things that we're working on there. And then you can get into the whole middle school concept altogether in some ways to help sort out some things there. You can get into the ways, and I know people will challenge this, but you can get into ways in which you pay teachers and systems. And, you know, are you incentivizing different things that may matter. So there are a number of things that could happen, but we have these things on the radar and we're trying to work through them.
Thank you.
You all have calls set up next week to discuss the quality rating system, which is the university teacher quality rating system, which is coming to the board in March full report. But one of the ways that a university can get a better grade is to recruit people in those high need certification areas. I know that's difficult to do, but that has been a focus of the development of this system, to work with the universities, for the Department to work with the universities and evaluate those programs, because the federal mandate to do so.
And we're also blessed too, like we have a really good relationship with higher ed right now. And we're collaborating and talking about these very issues. So it's an opportunity we don't need to miss.
Excellent, very good. Any other
Well,
comments?
I wanted to call up Dr. Chesson if she's here. I think what we have released in terms of a tutoring endeavor and the resources that we have released to put in the hands of systems is among the best that you'll see in this country. I'm a little biased, but I believe it. And so I wanted her to just walk through what we've released to systems and then also how we're trying to help systems think about what the summer could look like. I had a conversation earlier with Superintendent Bochet, and we were talking about various things, and I said, for me, I really believe that there needs to be an endeavor within all school systems for this summer that looks different than it's been before, probably. And we have that opportunity, and we also have the funding that we haven't previously had the ability to use. So, Dr. Chesson, if you don't mind, just share a little bit about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, good morning, everyone. About 2 weeks ago, we released our new Accelerate tutoring strategy, which is an approach to tutoring a little different maybe than what we've seen in the past. But the approach is a shift, first of all, in mindset, because when we consider learning loss and addressing unfinished learning, those things that have really become our new buzzwords as a nation, we could really get into dangerous waters and for the rest of our lifetime spend time remediating and looking backwards at what kids have lost. And so we could end up in a perpetual cycle of remediation. And so instead of that, the Accelerate strategy is about looking ahead at what students will need to know to be successful with on-grade level content. And so this approach has a few core pillars. And one is that we're being really intentional about the structures that are set up. That this tutoring strategy is built around embedding tutoring ideally within the school day, but without pulling from core instruction. So still acknowledging that core instruction time is sacred time when students need to receive on-grade level content, but embedding extra time within the day to help accelerate students and provide them materials and support and resources to make them successful in upcoming lessons by looking ahead at what is to come and what that child will need, what skills and knowledge they'll need to possess for those lessons in the future. So this is an equal access approach where tutoring should not be for only the families that can afford it or for the kids who, a lot of times we see students who have maybe not done so well on LEAP in the past, who have been pulled for LEAP remediation tutoring. This instead is an equal access approach to tutoring embedded within the school day, utilizing all the staff on the campus. And again, people will have funding for that, increased funding to think about how to creatively utilize staff to get this done. Another part of this is the resources that students are using during tutoring. Again, something that I found as a system leader, a struggle all the time is what do teachers use during tutoring time or during intervention blocks? A lot of times people are using high quality materials during core instruction, but they don't know what to use outside of that. So teachers end up using workbooks or ancillary resources, things they find on the internet, and it's a lot of additional stress and pressure on teachers to find resources to utilize outside of core instruction. So we've gone ahead as a department and worked with teacher leaders across the state to develop tutoring resources for both ELA and math. And so now teachers have these grab and go, ready to use lessons. But part of this structure and this strategy is acknowledging that all students are coming to the table a little differently. And so It's an approach where they would diagnose students' needs based on their data, and then utilize the resources to adapt those needs and reach these children in small group settings. So the tutoring would be consistent, frequent, over time. So we're releasing some spring resources. This is a phased rollout because, of course, creating tutoring resources does not happen overnight. It's extremely laborious, and our teacher leaders across the state have done a phenomenal job in stepping up to help out with this. So we're releasing some spring resources, understanding that people might not be able to change their schedules right now. That's just fine. So it might be done before school or after school even. As we look for the summer, we're really encouraging school systems to think about using the month of June. Spending a few weeks doing something really creative, innovative, fun, something that feels a lot less like a summer school and feels a lot more like a summer camp. And really lets go of that, what might have been leap remediation or summer school, something that felt punitive, like a punishment for kids who failed. And think about getting all kids into this really great experience and environment. We know when we think about learning loss, our kids have lost a lot more than just reading and math over the past year. And so think about doing things that would make our students want to come to school during this time and would make families want to send them, but embed within the day reading and math tutoring. And so maybe they're doing really fun things and rotations throughout the day, like PE or outside play or art, but within the day getting sessions of tutoring, really high quality reading and math instruction to accelerate them into next school year. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Castro.
Chesson, great presentation again. And we've had this conversation before, you and Dr. Brown and I think that these all sound like fantastic measures and efforts to try to advance students in the state. We struggle with the fact that we remain 47, 48, 49, 50 in so many statistics. What are we doing, or could you remind me in terms of how do we measure whether all of these actions are yielding results? So I like Ms. Morris and Ms. Boschek look at page 7 and that data, particularly with economically disadvantaged students, and given that we've got so many in the state in terms of our public and non-public school students, and with the statistics being so low at 20% and 37% in terms of mastery, what are we doing to measure from year to year whether these actions, which I think sound great, will deliver the sort of outcomes that we want?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So right now we are in early stages, but we obviously understand the need to work with urgency. And so releasing the spring resources, but then feeling out system leaders across the state to see who is going to use these resources, how are you using them? And so within the upcoming months, we are working with system leaders who have already said, yes, I'm really interested in implementing Accelerate. And so we will have some sampling across the state. And right now we are working on what data will we need to collect, how can we collect it to make sure that we're getting a return on this investment with these initiatives.
And as a follow-up question, in looking at the data based on various districts, I've got my handout for District 8 here, for example, and I see some districts that are really, really struggling, and some are smaller, more rural, most impoverished districts. So some thought and consideration, and I know there is, in terms of what do we do about those challenging areas. So St. Helena, I'll use as an example that struggles. And to Doris's point earlier, I think if you look at the poverty index and what they're dealing with there, it's a much more difficult challenge. But are we also giving some consideration to structure, how districts are structured and what we might be able to give support to? I know we've talked about the very taboo, unpopular topic of providing some support and resources, consolidation of districts. And I'm not sure whether that is or isn't the right thing to do, but I know that we've got some real deep-seated problematic areas. So would you mind sharing with us collectively your thoughts on that?
Well, first, title is the vehicle in which these formula funds flow. So in many ways, that is accounted for, but is that enough? That's a different question. So I think in the allocation of the 10%, for us, and we've called out the fact that we believe equity does matter, there's an opportunity within the allocation of the 10% that we could potentially, zero in on a few of those particular endeavors of interest.
I'll say as well, Mr. Castillo, that we have had a great response to the release of these resources. And to your point, a lot of our smaller school systems are the ones that don't necessarily have a full-time math content person on staff at their central office. And so the more that we can do as a department to produce guidance and resources and really be that guiding hand. My staff and I have gotten on calls the past 2 weeks, pretty much nonstop, with system leaders interested in implementing Accelerate in the summer learning program, trying to help them think through and walk through what this looks like. It's been some large systems, but a lot of them have been small systems who don't necessarily have large staffs who could create all of this guidance and resources. And so, to your point, that's when we're trying to step in even more and support.
Thank you.
Dr. Chason, I heard a lot of things about the resources with regard to the curriculum. I'm trying to get a better feel for if I'm a teacher in the classroom today and how my day changes with these additional resources. Are we talking about providing existing teachers with more resources, or are we talking about additional human resources to help? Do all this in the same amount of classroom time? I'm trying to get a better feel of what my day looks like as a teacher with these tutoring resources.
That really depends on the school system and how they're implementing. Again, I think what is happening now in the spring and how people roll out these resources is different from what they can do looking into next school year, where they can create different master schedules and even perhaps increase in staffing opportunities, even with their stimulus funding or variety of funds. But these are new resources for teachers to use, and they do work alongside our high-quality materials that have already been through our process and that a lot of our systems use, but they are also standalone, meaning that if the system, no matter what a system is using, these are resources that can be utilized by the teachers. So they're a nice complement to our high-quality materials, but they don't, and they work alongside, but they can also be used no matter what curricula people are using.
And whenever you refer, Mr. Morris, to, like hiring additional teachers and all to support that, that would be an independent decision that a system might choose to make with the funds that they have allocated to them. I also think it's going to look different, like in terms of what happens now versus what are the opportunities this summer when you have time to be planning for that right now as opposed to a midstream adjustment. But, we're pretty pleased with what we're seeing and the response that we're getting, the engagement that we're getting. Specifically with some of our newer superintendents who haven't been into work for as long, some of our newer system leaders. We'd like to also call out to Mr. Castille's question around some of the more challenged economically or otherwise systems. We are making a shift in our network structure. Years ago, you had regional service centers. They were throughout the state, maybe House and University, and you had, 15 or 20 individuals that worked with those. And for various reasons, I assume budget more than anything else, those were removed. And then the state had a system of basically 5 network teams. And so those were geographically housed around the state, and they had, a dozen or so employees on those teams. And then I'm assuming because of budget reasons, that was pared down to 4 networks, and then 3 networks, and then 2 networks, and now 1. And so that one network, well, really it was 2, and now it's essentially 1, but that one team of roughly 20 employees, they're trying to service well over 1,000 schools over the course of a year. And it's just not possible. It's not possible to do that well. And so we are making a transition, and we'll be sharing more about this with system leaders very soon. But we're making a transition where Mr. Folse's team, which includes Ms. Matthews, who's a former superintendent, and Ms. Pelton, who's also on that team, they're going to be working more around the system relations type work. And we're taking that basically 20-member team, and this spring they're undergoing training. They're all receiving the same training. It's like transformation training, or how to work with schools to help transform schools that are underperforming. And so then we will engage with system leaders, and we'll say, the 200 or so schools that are rated basically CIR, UIR, the schools in the state that are indicating, the data indicate are most struggling. We would then take those 20 people, and they would be assigned in a certain way directly to those schools who need the support the most through an internal MOU with the system leader that calls out, here are the things that we're going to do from our team, and here are the things you can do from your team. So we're going to try and help transform these schools. And that approach is really going to be about around 5 things. So we're going to take the 20 people, narrow the schools, 200-ish, and then we're going to only focus on a few things. Those being instructional leadership teams. So the principal, the assistant principal, maybe there's teacher leaders, making sure we have quality instructional leadership teams in place at these schools. The next piece being professional development around the things that matter, that is job embedded during the week at these schools. You call it PLC, you call it cluster. There are a number of things that they have called throughout the state. The next thing being the standards around principalship and helping to make sure the principal is actually hitting those standards of effective principalship. Because whenever we look at even high poverty, high performance schools, one of the things that we see over and over again is, if you have an effective principal, you can move the school. And so we're going to focus on principalship. The other is teacher standards, elevating, honing the craft of the teacher, and then also encouraging them to consider career paths for their teachers, where teachers can be, maybe mentors or content leaders or literacy specialists or master teachers, and trying to find a way to build additional leadership capacity within that school so that leadership is distributed. And so we're going to take the resource that we have that is finite and push that into those schools that we tend to believe probably need that support the most, because the approach of taking these 20 people across 1,700 schools, I just don't think that's realistic.
In terms of, that's a wonderful answer. In terms of other states that may have taken a similar approach that have achieved results, have you seen others that have, again, fantastic answer, and I presume it's based on what we've seen this work here and elsewhere, and here are the results that these states or districts have accomplished. Do you have that kind of supporting information that supports?
Well, and two, we have staff here with us who have done transformation work, who know the things that it takes in a school to actually transform schools. And so, I'm confident that we have a level of expertise here within our own team to help with this, but, that's why we have national partners around this work as well.
I've got a nagging question. I'm trying to figure out the right way to ask it, but I struggle with it, and it's on page 7. And when you look at the performance of Asian students compared to all other demographics, it's quite remarkable. And so you see this big gap, and let's kind of figure out what that demographic is doing really well compared to everyone else. And is it something embedded in that maybe is tied to ED populations, but it's it's something that I look at, it stands out, particularly when you look at Asian versus Black, the two top demographic categories. There's a huge gap there in both ELA and math. That's so tied broadly to those same challenges that are tied to economically disadvantaged students. Just, I can't help ask, what's happening there? Do you have any particular insight?
Well, without necessarily going into individual subgroups, we have, and I shared this number yesterday with some individuals, but we have, 122,594 students who are in DNF schools in our state under our present scale. And of those 122,594 students, I believe 91% of those students come from homes that are considered economically disadvantaged. And so, knowing that, I think we have to be more urgent, and we have to be more intentional in the ways in which we are supporting those schools, both from our staffing point, but also with a resource allocation standpoint, recognizing that, we talk about differentiation as a classroom teacher, but I think we also have to think about differentiation as system leaders or as board members or state superintendent to make sure that everyone gets what they need in order for them to be successful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Dr. Chesson. Wonderful job.
Thank you.
I would like Mr. Bradford, if you don't mind, just stepping up. We received our initial round of fast forward applications Wednesday, I think, and I'd like to just give the board a rundown of those applications and what you will, at some point in the near future, be asked to approve.
Good morning, Ken Bradford, Assistant Superintendent, Career and College Readiness. As we briefed before, we've shared the joint meeting back in January. We launched on January 6th the Fast Forward Initiative, which is intended to provide additional opportunities to students, either through giving them an associate's degree experience opportunity to further get associate's degrees and or get access to high demand apprenticeships, registered apprenticeships through the state. What we did was we offered, put out on January 11th, we had a webinar to provide some planning grants for school systems. So school systems in partnership with higher education, business and industry, they could submit an application. And there's 8 regional labor market areas in the state, and we're going to provide each of those regions a $50,000 planning grant. So over the next 4 months, they can come together and build up frameworks for associate degree pathways that they could use across their region or apprenticeship programs across their region. So literally, like hot off the press, on the 10th, Wednesday the 10th, the application window closed, so we were able to pull in. We did receive 8 applications, 1 for each region, and we will be bringing to you in March an allocation, and the school system in each of these regions will be the lead fiscal agent to dispense those funds across the region for over the next 4 months to bring in their post-secondary partners, bring in business and industry and apprenticeship partners, and design these frameworks for students. And so, as you know, I'll tell you that 8 that we received from RLMA 1, which is New Orleans. We received one of the grant, the lead fiscal agent is for Jefferson Parish. RLMA 2 is Baton Rouge. The Region 3, which is the Homer region, the lead school system will be Assumption. Region 4, which is the Lafayette area, is St. Landry Parish. Region 5, which is Lake Charles, is Vernon Parish. Region 6, the Alexandria area, is Rapides Parish. Region 7, the Monroe area, was Richland, submitted from that region to serve as the fiscal agent. That's Region 8. So those are the 8 regions. I'm sorry, Region 7 is Shreveport area, it's DeSoto, and then Region 8 is Richland. So those are the 8 regions that submitted to us by the close of business Wednesday to serve as the fiscal agent for their region to come together and plan around designing these associate degree frameworks and apprenticeship frameworks. And then each of them listed out for us, and we'll provide this to you, but they listed out as they come together and plan who their post-secondary partners would be, who their business and industry partners will be, and potentially some pathways that they will look forward to designing. Any questions?
I want to talk about the weather.
Fast forward, associates degree opportunities, apprenticeships, bringing people together, planning, designing them, and hopefully we'll we'll plan over the next 4 months. When we come to June, we'll have some initial stuff for you. And I think what we hear from the school systems and post-secondary, some of this is going on in the state now, but what we're hearing is this is bringing coherence together. School systems will know if we offer this set of classes, these will count, they'll be articulated across our institutions. Start with Mr. Preston. Yes, sir.
Here in Baton Rouge, at Baton Rouge Community College, at Baton Rouge Community College, we've got this wonderful CTE program and great facility, and it's extraordinarily underutilized. And in some respects, I guess, almost seems that maybe that there is a lack of interest by students, something maybe happening structurally there. Do you see that sort of changing with some of the measures that we've put in place that you've articulated, not just today, but over the last several months? They've been working on this for a long time and doing a great job.
Thank you. Maybe, Dr. Rum, do you want to speak a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I know it to be true that there are, as you mentioned, some structural concerns there, as well as East Baton Rouge has hired a new school superintendent who has indicated to me that he wants to work with the high schools and the high school principals to help further populate CTEC, but also utilize opportunities here, further personalize the experience for students in the high school. And I know he has been having meetings with principals there, and I don't know, but I'm hopeful that he has, I feel like he soon will express that desire to, just work to make sure more students are on track on the day-to-day exit high school. And it's important, another thing that's important to note is that as EPR was going through a superintendent search, the administration, specifically the CTE leadership and the high school leadership, continued to push forward with an application, even while they were going through that search. And so they have a level of ownership over this. And, I think that speaks highly of members of that team to push forward and, in fact, be the lead agency for the entire capital region as they were going through a superintendent search. And then the superintendent then coming on and saying, yes, I believe in this, I want to do this, let's submit this. And so I think it speaks to a team at EPR that wants to be a part of this work. So I'm hopeful around that.
Mr. Garber.
Yeah, while we're on the subject of, you're talking about apprenticeships and associate's degrees, makes me think about the career and tech diploma that we have. And I was talking to somebody about it the other day, I was wondering if you could update me on some data. Our typical, if you could, if you give this information, our typical graduate that graduates in our career and tech diploma route and then goes straight into business what are they making on average when they go into
Yeah,
their
so,
first year?
yeah, so when we look at the last certified graduation cohort data, we have approximately 1/4 of our high school students that are on the Jumpstart Career Diploma. So 8,000 students. Those students have taken the bundle of 9 CTE courses culminating in industry-based credential. I think, Mr. Garvey, it would depend on what region of the state and what their particular credential was that they're earning. We have students in the river parishes that are graduating on Jumpstart pathways with millwright credentials. And they're going into process technology and refineries. And we've had those students start in their first year at $60,000. We have other students that are in different pathways, culminating in different credentials that certainly they're not starting quite at that level. But one thing we do know is that through our process of bringing this to the board, when we do all of the credentials that are in our pathways, that are as a condition of graduating or being on the technical, have gone through a vetting process. And that vetting process has included, and most recently includes, small school system CTE supervisor, large school system supervisor, CTE supervisor, a BESE representative, a board of regents, post-secondary representative, an economic development representative, and the Department of Education. And these credentials are also coming through the Workforce Commission, who also is part of this vetting group. And they can put on the statewide focus list. So. And then our accountability system measures those credentials on where they're tiered and scaffolded as being a regional, a statewide, or a statewide advanced. And so depending on the level of credential as recognized by the Workforce Investment Council, is the level of points that is generated for a school system.
So we don't have an average number, or? I know the goal is to get that.
I mean, it's hard for me to give you an average number because it's depending on what you're asking me. What is the average, salary of a?
Let me try phrasing it another way. The goal is to get these children a high-paying job, higher than just your average high school degree would give. They have a high school degree plus some specialization in a industry certified credential.
Yes, I would
Can
say.
we prove that we're getting them high-paying jobs? In addition to just saying that's our goal, can we prove it? Do we have any data out there that shows that we're actually getting these kids into a higher-paying job than they would if they had just graduated with a high school diploma and not had these IBCs?
I think if you talk to any economic development board across the state, and they were to say, we were to say, in 2000 and through 2017, Louisiana high school students had an option to get a basic diploma. And we had over 20% of our students getting a basic diploma, and we had another about 5% of our students getting a historical career diploma. The basic diploma, which was a fifth of our graduating class, required basically just taking 23 credits of high school. There was no requirement to get an industry-based certificate. There was no requirement that you graduated with a diploma that aligned to TOPS. And if you were in CTE, it just required that you basically took 9 CTE courses. It was, at the time, it was 7. You took 7 CTE courses, and they were very hodgepodge. They were not fully aligned to the pathway. So the ask was, and what we heard for Jumpstart was, from business and industry, is we need students that are doing 2 things. One, they're taking coherent coursework, so that when they take 7, and the field said, really, we need more time than 7 Carnegie units to get students to a point where they can get a credential. We need 9. So we built into the system 9 credits available for students on CTE. And then the requirement was that you must get that industry-based credential. And what that industry-based credential does is gives them the skill to enter into their specific craft or field. And so it makes them more employable and they're trained for their position.
Thank you.
I think think we'll have data on that in a couple of years if we can push forward some initiatives here with Fast Forward, and I know we're talking about things relative to accountability as well. But I'm coming out of the superintendency, and, you know, even there, I saw far too many credentials awarded that I would not consider to be necessarily high wage credentials. So we have to do more work. We have to do more work there, and that's part of the problem we're trying to solve.
Yeah, and I would add two other things to that. I would also say that was the impetus for the Jumpstart 2.0 course sequencing, was to kind of refine these, refresh them, bring them up to date, get more credentials in the system that are aligned to the pathways, et cetera. And then I think the other thing is just relative, it's a little harder to track students when they graduate high school and they go straight into the workforce. It's harder to track where that student is, 1, 2, 3 years down the road for those 8,000 students on the career diploma, as it is over on the other side for the 75% of the students that get a college diploma. It's very easy to see if they have arrived on a 4-year university campus and whether they're getting scholarships and what their consistency
Kind of age and entry level positions a factor as well. That's,
I mean, you
that's
can,
a big
and you can do that kind of work, but you have to pay a policy evaluator to do it, to take DOE data and merge it with the wages data at the Workforce Coalition. So I've done that kind of work for vocational rehabilitation services. That's gonna cost you about probably $100,000, and I can't do that work anymore because I'm with BESE. So you need to contact somebody like Stephen Barnes at the Public Policy Institute at Lafayette, and you need, doing that kind of evaluation work, you've got to be able to merge system data, and also they guard that wages data like it's Fort Knox over at the Workforce Commission. So you have to, it's a lot of paperwork and a lot of data restrictions that you've got to be able to go through to get access to their wage data after they leave us.
I think that brings us back to, how do we know things are working?
Yes. Right. Can we prove it? If we get a chance, we'll see a way to prove it, that would be helpful.
all right, and you have to follow more than just an entry level position as an 18-year-old, because it gets their foot in the door, but it's going to take them a while to build it up. If they do have the opportunity to get into that, maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah, I was just gonna speak also that there was a resolution coming out, it was probably familiar with it, but there's a resolution coming out of the legislature last session that speaks specifically to this, talking about the evaluation of the Jumpstart program and what are the current barriers and challenges. And so we are working on a resolution to that. And there are some challenges. It's really from a data perspective, Mr. Garvey. The way the workforce employment records are done is by Social Security. And so we have Louisiana security IDs here. So there's not just this simple pairing of taking someone that's in the workforce with a Social Security number and then trying to map that back to the Louisiana secure ID for a student. Because any young student, again, has to release that Social Security number. There's student data privacy laws that we have to abide by. Right, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Yes.
Yeah, could you elaborate a little bit more on that future educator pathway that was non-public media and a little bit about that?
Sure. So, as part of Jumpstart, one of the pathways is a pre-educator pathway. And what that pathway does is it bundles a sequence of courses, many for which are for like dual enrollment credit when it initially started with University of Louisiana Monroe. And then that pathway, if you take the set of courses and you get some specific scores around your ACT, scores around your praxis, that culminates in a credential, like a pre-educator credential, which is now recognized by the Workforce Investment Council as a statewide IBC. And so the thinking around this is that, one, it's having dual enrollment coursework. Number two, it's a recognized credential. Number three, it's in partnership with our higher ed institutions to offer the coursework, many of which would just articulate right into a 4-year university education program. And this is gonna be something that is going to help us get more educators in the field and start that early pipeline. This is work that's being led by Ms. Kim Eckert.
And what is the credential again?
Call it a pre-educator credential is what the credential is.
I mean, what does it take to get it again?
Oh, so there's different levels of it, but it's a combination of the coursework, and then there's a combination of praxis scores that go along with that. And so depending where you are on the tier, it gives you a certain level of that.
Yes, Mr. Rock.
One last thing. Maybe I didn't follow it. You mentioned at that non-public, that like for non-public, if we went through perhaps a future educator club, but it's, and I just, if we don't have to do it right now, but I want to talk more about it.
Yeah.
All right, we'll circle back. Any other questions, comments? This has been amazing. Any objection? Motion carried, and before we adjourn, want to say something? This has been an incredible amount of work. Yes, Mr. Morris?
Hi, Ms. Allen. I thought we were going to have the discussion about the 10%. Is that, or
We are carrying it over to our next meeting.
Okay.
It's going to be an agenda item along with what Preston has requested, absolutely. Thank you for that. Incredible work, incredible delivery. Thank you, Department of Ed, under Superintendent Bromley's leadership. Amazing work. I know that it's tireless work, a lot of work, hard work. Some of you are not sleeping at night because you're carrying out that work for our children. I appreciate that. Thank you. BESE staff, as you can tell, they set up this room. You see the wires all over, prep. They were here early getting this prepared. I also am very thankful for the LBE. Notice in your folder, you have a mask. Thank you for that, the LBE mask. And,
I ordered BESE mask,
and
it's not here yet.
yeah, that was the other. And AG, from the Office of AG, thanks for being here, Alex. Chairman Garfield, appreciate and grateful for your input. It was perfect with you being here for us. Thank you. And I've also invited him to lunch with us. You can have lunch with us. And hope this day was very informative, beneficial. I would highly recommend, Ms. Davis, that BESE retreats are at the beginning of the school year, the new year, I should say, sorry, at the new year, a new time, so that we can have this type of information, know how we're moving forward. So that's a recommendation.
President Howard, Steve Chairman Lee, I just want to acknowledge, I just want to acknowledge, we could not have in our state a chairman that is more engaged with what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. That's much.
But I mean that, I mean, like, he will say, call me anytime, let me know, I want to know, let's meet, let's talk, and he's here, he's sat here all day.
He's been learning.
So, thank you.
Chairman, you have anything to say?
Thank you.
Okay, great. All right. Next item. Next item,
Next door. Oh, you're going
meeting
to-
adjourned. Pardon? No public comments?
No.
Meeting adjourned. Oh, it's in this room?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Lunch is served next door. Enjoy and please travel safely. The weather is intensified.